So anyway, here we are, right?
Yes, sir.
This happens. We get talking. We've already been talking kind of like off record for an hour.
I said all the good
whatever.
stuff off the record.
Yeah, so
exactly.
we don't want any evidence, as it were. But anyway, welcome to episode 7 of the Aging Arborist podcast, where we sit down with some friends. We have good conversations. Brooke and I do the interrogating. It's all good. Today we're sitting down with our dear friend, Derrick Martin, country boy. Quick introduction. Derrick is a dad, competitive climber, tree climber, contractor, educator, speaker. Am I leaving anything out?
Just
Ambassador.
There you go.
There you go. I would just add, just super passionate dude for life and truth.
Yeah.
I think that really is like everything came from that.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
So anyway, welcome. We're
Thanks.
glad you're here. Derrick actually worked with us yesterday, so he came down. You're about how far? Is it an hour plus or?
Yeah, it's just under 2 hours.
Oh wow.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be right around 2 hours, but since I moved last year, it's under 2 hours now.
And you're in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm in Lancaster County
Cool,
now,
cool.
which everybody thought I was in before, but now I made it true.
I got you.
Okay.
Just a
I like
bunch
it.
of-
It was easier to say Lancaster than
Yeah.
this small town in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Nice.
Yeah, I was really figuring out how to word that.
That's perfect. That's
Be
perfect.
careful, don't slip on the tongue on that one.
Yeah.
You might say something inappropriate, We don't have a beep filter or anything. It just as we found out with Tatey when that gets released, there's some
Tatey's a
some
good
colorful language in there, which
Always.
is good, man.
Always.
But you gotta be true to yourself, man.
Yes.
So
Yes.
anyhow, so I don't know if you have anywhere you want to start specifically.
Well, no, I don't.
Yeah.
We were talking before, and the whole thing is that we just start somewhere, and whatever happens.
Go with the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
So
obviously, they always like if you have something that's awesome.
Well, what I want to do is I'm just going to give a couple personal thoughts because I always like to add a little bit of my, if I know the guest, I just want to say, a couple things. I mean, I enjoyed Derrick's passion.
How long have we known each other? Like when I came down, Jason Pilla, and that was my second boss. So I figure we met either at one of the work days or one of the first competitions that I would have went to because I started competing in the New Jersey chapter. And I was thinking about that when I came down this time. I was like, how long have I known Paul?
Well, you were in and I'll tell you, I've shared this memory with you before. And I don't know that this was the first time. I think I had met you a couple of times, but you were brand new, but you were new.
Oh, yeah, I was new.
So
I was
I remember
green
we were
still.
doing a work day. You were in your 20s because we were at a work day and we had Schmitty there with his stick crane on the work day.
Okay.
And he was doing a bunch of work and there was like one last dead limb on this tree. And I'm actually, the memory's a little fuzzy.
I think I remember exactly
I don't
what you're
remember
talking
if he put you in the tree or you climbed. And I just remember looking at your sort of willingness to go, I'll go get it. Your willingness, your body type, your passion already then was evident. And I remember because I have this thought sometimes. I'm like, man, I hope this guy sticks with it because I think he's got the potential to be pretty good at this.
I like that.
And I said the same thing about you from the comps, but what are you, 40?
I'm 40 now.
40.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm
Let's
just
not add
about
any more to it.
Yeah, right. I feel that, bro. I'm just almost evenly 20 years your senior and 15 his. Yeah. So I have that little bit of 10,000
You're older
foot.
than me.
What time?
You're 45?
I'm 44. Yeah.
44.
44.
I did not guess you was older than me.
So this seems to be a common pattern. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. It's a good thing.
No, so Tatey said
You
the
got
same
young
thing.
energy.
I definitely do have young energy, and I intend to keep it that way,
Yeah.
like yourself.
I'm trying to.
No, you
I'm trying
don't
to
need to
retain
try.
it.
You're doing a good job. Trust me.
I'll tell you what, after the last 2 weeks with being down with that back injury, I was like, I did not feel young anymore.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing, and not to go, but
No, do it.
Body-wise, that's not what it's about. It's energy.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I'm talking about. You don't have that issue at all. Body-wise, you have to figure things out.
We'll have to, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm getting to the point where I'm realizing I have to maintain where, I was young up until now.
Yes, yes,
I didn't have to do anything. I bounced.
Yeah.
Just get right back up and go.
Rebound. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, not to to your point. So I'm interested to hear that more because you saw him very similar experience, where you're able to recognize that the energy will fit for this industry, but like in the most positive way possible.
Yeah.
So what year was that? If you guys
I wish I remembered.
I think I know which one you're talking about. And from what I remember, there was one limb that had to be got out of the last tree, and we were kind of all closing up.
Yeah.
And I tried to throw ball into this tree, but I was not being very successful. So I have a lot of people watching to go get one limb that I was I volunteered to go get it. And I remember Brian Noyes was there, Brain, Mark's good friend.
Yep.
And a couple interesting stories with that. But yeah, what we were talking about is it was kind of woodsy where we were. So he said, you should lay down a tarp. And I thought he meant like a tarp, like that's how you should store your throw line. So I eventually changed to that a few years later of using a tarp for my throw line. Okay. But he just meant so that it doesn't get caught in all the sticks.
Yeah.
When I was throwing, he was getting tangled on the brush and the ground and stuff. And it was a great option of just laying down a tarp, in the woods to do that. But yeah, it took me a while to get in the tree, and then I foot locked, but it was like new to foot locking. So although I had the energy, I didn't have the technique or the skill at that point. So I had to like rest at like 15 feet, rest at like 30 feet, and then like finally got it and got it done. But I do remember, for whatever reason, that was pretty memorable to people because you're not the first person who brought that up. I worked with Brian Noyes earlier this year on a project up in New Hampshire. And so we sort of did the same reminiscing, and he remembered that. My thing with Brian Noyes that really cracks me up, and being new to this, I think it was my first work day, and I went to make a cut, and I didn't have a great safety thing with the chaps and everything like that. Mm-hmm. I didn't start by wearing chaps or a hard hat actually. Yeah. But I grabbed the hard hat thing pretty quick. But chaps was not easy for me to remember to put on. So at the work day, I grab a saw, I go to make a cut. It was a crane pick was coming down, so I think it's the same year you were talking, my first one. And Brian yells at me. He's like, "You can't run a saw without chaps." So I'm like a little frustrated. I wanted to help. I put down the saw, I go to get chaps, he picks it up and makes the cut. And I'm like, what the heck? The guy just yelled at me, just made the cut, just wearing pants. I had no clue that there was chainsaw pants at this point. Fantastic. So that's what he was wearing. He wasn't breaking. But I was teed off. I was like, he yells at me.
Yeah,
you think you got aim? Like you're any better at running a saw than I am?
Wow.
I had no clue until I kind of actually had said something. I was like, how come you can make a cut without chaps on, but I can't? He's like, because I'm wearing saw pants. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Saw pants.
That's it. Yeah. So I got saw pants too.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't know.
Yeah. That's great.
Wow.
No, that's awesome. But yeah, I mean,
that have been a ways back. If you're saying
that would have been 19 years ago.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because saw pants had to have been the puffy snow pants style.
They were bigger for sure, and he would have had the steels from Europe, so they were a closer fit because the European fit was always a little bit more snug,
slim. Yeah. Okay.
But I didn't recognize it. But the work days were one of the biggest things that I felt helped progress me in the early stages of my career. Just being exposed to, what was it, like 136 is the number that stood out to me. I think one of my first 2 years is the amount of volunteers that came out to that work day. And to have that kind of exposure. Now, I went to volunteer to be exposed, but I had no clue what I was getting involved in. Yeah. And then I really made a point to go to even when I was out of the New Jersey chapter for, I want to say, my first 6 or 7 years that I was climbing, because where else are you going to get to climb with someone like yourself or Mark Chisholm or, so I specifically link crews with like Mark or Mark Powell was another guy that was really active online at the time, and he had all the gear, which was so funny because then he lended it all out. Then I never got to see him climb because he was always like, well, I would do it, but I let him use the new tree motion. I let him use the wooden rope wrench or whatever it was. It was always fun.
Yeah, I never saw him climb either. But anyway, it's funny you mentioned the wooden rope wrench. I forget what park we were at, But I remember that
do.
It looked like a pipe.
Yeah, I remember when.
And I was like, that thing's cool. Oh, I thought that was you.
Mark got one before I did, but
cool.
we did kind of have it at the same time. But I remember that one specifically because he had his jet sled with all his gear in it. And he'd be like, he was so good about allowing everybody to use it, and
cool.
he got the newest stuff right away. So he had the stuff people wanted to try.
And he was always excited about it too,
Dude, he
which
had
was
a
good.
great energy
he
about
did.
it too. He had some negative energy at times too.
Yeah, that's the yin and the yang, right? That's kind of how that's
how
the,
it works,
the
right?
demon that lives in all of us, But what was the genesis of that? Like, what was the story of how you procured that wooden rope wrench? Like, what was the? Because that was like prototype stuff.
Yeah. So wooden rope wrench. Kevin actually showed it to me in Kentucky. I went down to the Kentucky chapter competition one year, and I was super excited to go because Kevin had put on Tree Buzz about the single rope, and it was the Fate revolver then. And so there was all these little, I've always been about the details of interfacing and the way things connect and everything. So he was connecting his tether to the carabiner, and then the figure 8 was free. So you pulled a bite through the figure 8, and then he clipped it with the carabiner, and the carabiner was on the tether, so that pulled the bite, whatever. So I was super excited to go and talk to him because I was connecting my tether to the figure 8, and then the carabiner was free, but it changed the way the rope loaded the carabiner. So some people were like having this, hey, I don't think that's safe because you have a carabiner side loading into a ring. So the way I was setting it up with the figure 8, I felt very clever because now the carabiner was in line, and it was more of a belay slave, which is a product that they made for rock climbing belay, and it was being used exactly the way that was. So if it was certified, considered safe in rock climbing for a dramatic fall into a device, it should be fine for us. So I was so tickled to show Kevin this little difference. Yeah. And then he showed me, he's like, well, I've taken it further, and here's my prototypes. And so it was actually his very first wooden rope wrenches had a ring incorporated into it to take the heat. So he had cut them apart, put a ring in, glued them together, and then the rope would run through the wood over the ring itself. Okay. So the ring was kind of taking the heat. Such a cool little concept.
No doubt.
And then he simplified it to just like wood, which his theory, and I love the way his mind thinks, is like, if we're going to natural crotch over a limb, 180 degrees over wood, he's like, the bend it takes through the rope wrench essentially is 290s, which is 180 degrees.
Yep.
Why not just run it through the wood? We don't need the fancy hardware.
Okay.
And he was right. And it was such a cool concept.
That's pretty cool.
The way, so I bought one from him at the expo when he brought I want to say it was just 20 of them or something, and sold them. And so I got one then. Thought it was so cool. He said he was having a hard time drilling. The wood would split. Yeah. So he found it easier to cut them in half, use a Dremel on each side, and then glue them back together. And the concept was that wood glue is stronger than the wood itself. Yep. So that's how he made them. I had mine up at this big red oak, and I made a big swing the first week I had it. And it just felt weird. And I looked back, and it had split right down the middle of the seam. And the rope, it was actually not in the groove anymore. It was pinched way back.
Interesting.
It had split right through it. Yeah. And I called Kevin. I was like, hey, Kevin, you definitely have to do something different than wood. You got to get metal or something because I just broke it. But what was happening, what I figured out was the heat created in the friction with the rope running through the wood warmed up the glue.
Got it.
So it wasn't adhesive anymore. So although in theory we're putting it through different elements. And that's kind of a cool thing, especially with tree work. I mean, Murphy's Law, if it can, it will happen in tree work, right? Yeah. And that is so true. Tree work is probably the one thing that I've seen that is always true. Yep. Worst case scenario will happen. someday. At some point.
Someday, yes.
At some point.
There's an adage with motorcycle riding. My stepdad taught me before I started was there's two kinds of riders: the ones that have fallen and the ones that are going to fall.
Right, and that's kind of
the same thing with trees. Like,
yeah.
and we're doing everything we can to push off the really bad situation.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing every time we're climbing.
Yeah.
For over the 20, 30 years, 40 years.
Well, that's why the statistics are you're most likely to get hurt when you first get in. And when you're crazy experienced, because then you get that complacency.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a quick question though. So I'm fascinated by your natural inclination to discover. I would say discover, but to discover or understand the interfacing part.
Yeah. I think that comes from my dad. My dad is a really smart, creative guy. So my dad and brother have a business that they build trailers for behind motorcycles. My dad started the business himself, and he built all the trailers from scratch. So he had to design them, create molds that they fiberglass it, put it all together. Really interesting. So especially when I was young and the business was new, he was constantly creating and working on innovating things with these campers and stuff. So I feel like, even though I don't necessarily specifically remember it, he has all these doodles. He was always doodling and trying to figure things out in detail. And he's a very detail-oriented person. So I feel like I just naturally got it from him in that regard of attention to the details. And the other thing that my dad really instilled into me is efficiency. You always try to find the most efficient way of doing something, or something can always be refined to be a little bit more efficient or in a better way. And so that attention to detail in learning efficiencies is also where it is. So like interfacing is something that I'm a big, really get into in like connection points and stuff, and those details, because those are what create the efficiencies. And like we were talking about the competition climbing and stuff, and how I said, oh, now I'm a contract climber. I kind of was like, oh, I'm in the big trees. I'm comfortable with that. Like, it'll transition into the competition climbing. No, because the details are so different. And when I was training for the competition, I didn't even realize I was training. I was really just having fun playing with this SRT stuff. And I had a silver maple in my yard. It wasn't the biggest tree, and it was right against the power line, so I could only climb one side of it. But I did it almost every day. And my SRT was so new. And people were saying you could be so much more fluid on moving rope system. So I was really picking apart the details of that body movement. How do I have to move my body? What do I have to do different to get that seam smoothness? And I really was breaking down the details, which translated directly into the competition. Yeah. But I kind of got away from, and now I'm realizing it's those details are the things that make the difference in competition versus production.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I just want to pick up on something just to spin back on the whole thing about your dad. It's funny because, I've heard this whole thing about like second generation. Oh, he's a second generation climber or this or that, and or tree person. And I won't say I didn't give it any credence, but I didn't think much of it. I'm like, well, you still have to learn the craft on your own, so forth and so on. But we just did a work day. We just had our Jersey
I know. I was so disappointed. I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
I wish I would have.
And I can always make sure
It's the first Saturday of December every year.
It is.
I know when it
exactly.
is. It just didn't register.
And that's fine. Obviously we'd love to have you, but the funny thing I know is like in our section you had, and I didn't think of this, but you had myself and Mason, my kid. You had Warren Hipley and his dad. Right. And you had Rick and Cody Yost all in the same section. And Mason fed back to me later. And actually Joe Gripe said something about, it's interesting that he said it to me, there's two generations here of three sets of family. And he's like, and the young guys are kind of the ones pushing the envelope. Like Warren was a maniac dropping trees. You had Cody on a machine, Mason on a machine, and stuff was just moving. I was basically a supervisor. Yeah. And I'm like running around looking for something to do. I felt kind of silly.
What you do best.
Yeah, right. Like I'm just like, I want to put my, anyway. I say all that to say that there is definitely like my kids, the girls and Mason, sitting at the table while we're talking about tree work while they're next to me, while we're doing little jobs together. And the girls worked on the crew multiple summers. So sitting sort of at the feet of your dad while he's creating and thinking and moving. Because the one thing I said to Mason about going up with you yesterday was like, I was like, listen, you know, Derrick's an accomplished climber. Yes, granted. I was like, but he's a tinkerer and he's an innovator. I said, so go up and like if you get a chance to go up, because I sort of strategically thought that could happen. I actually had another job.
I'm glad you put the idea in my mind before we went out, because that's what I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then I left the crew to use the bathroom, and when I came back, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Perfect.
Let's do it.
100%.
Nice.
But I want that because there's definitely, and I think when you say, yeah, you got it from your dad, there's sometimes we just don't realize what's being seen and passed on.
Oh, yeah.
It's not quite osmosis, but man, it's
I mean,
it's close.
It's pretty close.
It
I mean,
is.
and again, we're both. Well, actually, your kids are older.
Yep.
I think your kids are right behind them, and mine are behind yours. But there is always just by what they say to you. You heard that? Yeah, I was sitting over here.
It was they pick up way more than what
Then you
Than you
even
think.
just basic stuff.
you know when when you're trying to teach them. Yeah, they're maybe picking up a little bit of it, but they're picking up more when you're not focused
exactly.
on it.
And which is to your point, where you know, like your dad, obviously a creator, you know, innovator, always just trying to like move forward with the thought process. Like obviously you. Osmosis, but you definitely. That's what
He's absorbing.
What's that?
He's absorbing, like it's
Absorbing, yes.
Yeah.
And I've known that about you. So I've known you since 2000, I believe 2010 or 11. It was Jersey competition.
Yeah, was it your first competition?
My
in
first
Jersey?
one was 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my awareness of you and Jake came in around like 12, 13 is when I started to pay attention. But I believe you were involved at that chapter.
Oh yeah,
at that point anyway.
Yeah, New Jersey's where I started competing, and then so even like I did with the work days, even after I left the chapter,
you always came back.
I always came back.
Yep, exactly.
I still try to. I haven't been great about it.
No, we're getting older.
Yeah, well, time, and family,
absolutely.
and stuff. Yeah.
But my point is like once I got to know you and start to really like understand your energy. That's always been, you know, and you and Jake have that.
You said tinkering. Like
tinkering.
I go back to tinkering to get re-motivated. Like when I'm feeling really low and not motivated anymore, going back and just replaying with my gear or organizing my shop, and then eventually you just like pick stuff up and I was like, oh man, how could I use this? Or like this has just been sitting for a while. I'd like to reincorporate this, and then ideas start running. And you kind of get a little bit excited just to try something new. And the other side of that is by tinkering and trying something new, it does keep it interesting, even in the small details. Sure. Like, you know, my setup really hasn't changed much in the last 10 years, probably 7 years specifically, but closer to 10 probably. But it's like changing your lanyard setup, one thing, or like now I added a second ring to my bridge with a carabiner that stays onto it at all times, and like just little details. It's like, okay, how does this improve efficiencies, or where did I lose efficiency, or like, That little tinkering is kind of what keeps me like excited. My energy level high.
Yeah, exactly. The creative. The phrase I use is creative man is the child. Like it's the child inside, meaning like the child never grows up.
Right.
But you just become a creative man. Like you still have to take care of your family, your bills. But you like that's what you're talking about. When you start tinkering, you're that kid again. There's no
you
bills.
Have that
There's
energy,
no exactly
you get that excitement again.
Yep. I love that.
It's funny. I missed that part a little bit because when I was having to climb, you know, more days a week and not have the responsibilities of business ownership and different things I'm doing, like even doing this, you know, and but I can remember I had a barrel stove in my shop, and my wife was a night nurse. And before Mason was born, the two girls would be in bed, and I'd get a fire going out in the wood stove, and I'd either sharpen chains, but I had like, you know, beams in the shop, and I was doing kind of, we were doing some cool stuff with like, there's a guy, Robert Phillips, I don't know if you remember, he's one of the old heads from the West Coast. Mark,
oh, okay, yeah.
Super, but he would be at the demo tree a lot and like share a lot of stuff with moving rope systems of you got both legs coming down, and we would put like an ascender over here with a pulley and drop your tail through and create mechanical advantage. And then I got into playing with stuff. Can I advance that? Can I, we would create like a little bridge with some throw line. So when you pulled down, it would pull that ascender up and move your whole system at the same time. And these were the little efficiencies we were tinkering with. So it's noticeable in what you do, like as an observer watching you and having the privilege of working with you, over the years. It's fun to see that aspect. I do want to jump on something.
Let's go for it.
Because I think it's a natural segue. And you brought it up, but I just want to expand on that because we did mention it with Mark, is that the work, as much as we love it, there is as much mental as physical. So there's a grind that can happen. And I always say this half jokingly, but those of us that live in this area that deal with severe summers, we come into spring after cocoon season in the winter when we just can't work as much because the days are shorter, etc. So we get this little pent up energy and that first smell of spring and the grass is popping and somebody's cutting the lawn and you're like, it's here. And there's a natural excitement to go out and do our thing. By the time you hit the end of August, you're ready for fall, right? So when you get wound, sort of ground down mentally, physically, you mentioned the tinkering helps. If you're talking to a person who, because I'll get DMs sometimes from people like, hey man, I love what I do, but like, man, I'm empty.
Hitting a wall.
Yeah, like if you were talking to someone here that doesn't have those experiences, can you expand a little bit on some of those things that reinvigorate you, that give you that push, the punch to kind of get yourself going, either mentally or physically or both?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was at Arborist Enterprise and we're working with Tony Trussell, and he kind of hit that law, and he was vocal about it. He's like, yeah, it's not the same as it used to be. And I remember going to Mike, I talked about him when we were talking earlier, who was one of the more influential. He's like, I don't think I'll ever get that. This is just so exciting. It's so much fun. And now being in it 20 years, I have hit those laws. And they are a little bit hard to work through. Tinkering certainly does it. So when I first would get it, it was like I put so much energy and so much focus into this that I actually had to try to focus on something else. Taking up hiking, I did a lot of that, or paddle boarding, or then I got a one wheel and something else that got me excited. So it wasn't always being focused 100% on trees, so that when I was in it, then it was a little bit exciting. So that was one of the first things I did. I actually love tinkering that. Now is, and now working with Notch as a brand ambassador, I do a lot of field testing, and that has really got me excited again in being able to be on that part. It's a dream come true for me, because when I first got into it, I was so much about the gear. I was like, man, what a dream to get to try some of this stuff before it came out and test it. And here I am getting those opportunities. That's cool. And that's fun. It is fun. Yeah. There's a little bit of a stress that comes with it, as when products come out and maybe they're not perfect or whatever, and now you're getting this feedback from people that are how did you not catch this? Or not everything. They can't take everything. It's a company. Process, they got to look at the making money and whatever. Sure. Yeah. Or some things just aren't caught because of the way you work. And an interesting thing what you were saying earlier, this is walking away from that question a little bit. Okay. Yeah, but when a high-end person tests a product, they look at it totally different than a first person getting into it. So it's really interesting taking a test product that I'm given and playing with it, from an experienced mindset, and then putting it in the hands of someone who's a brand new climber like Mason or something, and being like, yo, can you climb on this once and just see how they do something different, or how their mind works different. But and that's an energizing thing. So to go back to what you're saying, another thing that has gotten me excited over the years when I'm feeling a law is training. Seeing somebody else succeed and have a lot of fun, and seeing that excitement and that energy. When I was at Goods, foreman, safety and training, I hit one of my first lulls, and it was like, I'm kind of feeling worn out, and it's becoming more of a job, just a job, instead of so much fun and excitement to go to. we got a new climber in, and he was really into it, had been learning on his own on YouTube and stuff. And to see that energy and that excitement for it really invigorated me. And I remember going back in, and he wasn't the easiest guy to work with. And I remember that they're like, oh, well, how is it working with him? I'm like, well, it can be frustrating, but it's also invigorating because I see how excited he is. And it's taking me back to when I first got into it.
Yep.
And so sometimes that's all it is, going to these work days, going to the competition. I haven't gone to the competitions as much in the last 4 years since COVID. And the work days, when you got kids now and they're growing up, you prioritize them as you should.
100%.
But those events not only were the learning things for me, but now are the inspiring things. Going to the expo, going to the international. Like I went to the international for the first time, not competing or not like Jake and I are so close. So Dan Lawton and I are close, but it's not the same relationship I have with Jake, who's like a brother to me almost. I went down just to watch and to have that excitement come back. And it did. It inspired me to look at my details again, like I said, where I thought contract climbing, being in big trees and being comfortable was what I needed. But no, the details. And then when you start to focus on those details again, it gets a little bit exciting. It gets a little inspiring.
Feeling it right now.
Right.
Let's
so
go.
it's these conversations.
Yeah.
It's just getting together with people that have the same passion. And that's something that I struggle with. We were talking before this about the hearing, how it's affected my social life and stuff. One thing, because I've put so much time and energy into this industry and into this job and into climbing trees, and I love it, but I found myself becoming less and less relatable to others in natural day life, because this is 100% of my focus. When I'm going to eat with somebody or out having a drink with somebody and they're talking about cars or remodeling their house, I didn't do anything with those. I climbed trees, man.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, I know.
So it's you can't get that inspiration.
What a weirdo.
And I know, right? Yeah, I know. Oh, everybody said it. They all saw it.
I love it. It's awesome.
But so to get together with this community, your family, your tree family, is the things that get me re-inspired and reinvigorated. So when you're feeling those lows at work, or I've been in this in a long time, I would highly encourage you to get together with others that have the same passion, go to an event, even if you don't know the people there, because it is inspiring. It's encouraging. And where they used to be our learning things, and now maybe I've heard the same talks, 10 times. Sure. You're still grabbing details, but the bigger thing I'm getting back is the energy back, that motivation, just a refocus. And changing your focus within it can be the thing that inspires you as well.
That's awesome.
So training, going to these events, tinkering, all of it does it.
That's awesome.
Which it seems to be, it is a common theme.
It is.
Where I think you said it in the podcast, I'm not sure one of them, but the idea is that you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then
I
you're
put
doing
myself
this.
in that bubble.
You did, exactly, right? And you're just, and regardless, like I'm in a municipality, you're in contract climbing, you're a business owner, and there's just a bubble regardless of what position you're in. But not everybody in that bubble is at the same excitement level as you.
That's true.
It's just not how it works. Once in a while, you might have a super team. Like I'm pretty sure you guys saw on social media the heli job.
Oh yeah, that was a crazy job.
But that's not real. That was for that job.
That was one event.
They don't work together all year long.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That is the dream for everybody, to be with everybody at that highest level of enthusiasm. But what I'm trying to say, they all have to return to their jobs as well.
Right.
Back to the bubble. And the common theme is exactly what you said. To reinvigorate and energize, obviously, outside the industry is one part. But more importantly, within the industry, you need to connect with people who are tapped into that energy level.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then you fall into the lull of just another day, another job. So
100%. And it's funny, Bubble. I was just while you were saying that, I was thinking about a fish tank. Like our work life is a fish tank, but there's a whole world outside the fish tank.
There you go.
And one thing that you hit on, that we hit on when we were at Expo, and it was cool to see you. It's so funny because we always have time for each other, and I always give that grace. Like when I see someone and they're involved in a conversation, I don't need to. And I walked by his booth, and he was with the thing and the trinkets and all. And I just went, I don't even know if I went, hey, Derrick, at one point there was like a lull and I just tapped him but kept moving. And I'm like, he's so in the zone right now. But it was cool to see that. But also, like you mentioned, we go to classes and it's like, oh, another update on this or that. And yet you, Mason, myself, Matt Hurley, Cassandra, like we sat outside the class, because there was really nothing. And we sat there for the whole hour the class went on, and then another hour after that. And then we all went out to dinner and sat there for 2.5 hours and basically did this. And the cool thing was to see Mason, I watched his energy come up because all he knows is tree awareness and a little bit of like when Rick comes out or you come out. So he knows there's a world out there, and he's gone to winter management as a family, with us before, but he was young. He's been on some job sites and whatnot. But to see him now be in the business for 1.5 years and then go to his first expo and just, he's bouncing around.
That was
He's
his first expo?
His first
I
expo.
Oh, no way.
I didn't realize that until just now.
And
that's
he's
exciting.
having those hallway conversations, and he's like, yeah, you didn't see, but like I was talking to Brick, and I'm like, no, I saw, but it was like,
You're doing your thing.
but like then we go back to the room and he's blah blah blah, but like and so he's getting that.
I love it.
And he's trying to make that decision about what's he going to do. And he's like, man, the one thing about this that I just don't know where I'm going to get it is the tribe, like the community.
You find your people.
You
You're
do.
drawn to them.
Yeah.
But going to events where you're going to be exposed to those people is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
The kid,
Yeah, and you touched on that super team kind of thing.
Yeah.
Man, I would encourage people to try to get on jobs with the others that they look up to or just close friends with, because you get so inspired. Like I got to do a super job, a super crew job down in Atlanta. Got to chase an ice storm. On the Augusta National course with Jake Riggs, Mark Chisholm, Jared Abergino, Mike Tatey.
Wow.
Like a Doug Ralph was a part of. Like what a group to get to climb with. Brian Giza. Like it was awesome.
Yeah.
And spend a week climbing with those guys is awesome. And then another thing that came away from that is like my confidence level went up because I really looked up to Mark and Jared, even though they're shorter than me.
Are you taller than Mark?
I think we're probably
No,
about the same.
in his brain.
I'm taller than everybody in my home brain.
That's great.
I look down every day.
That's great.
But to climb with them and be like, wow, I was like, although I do feel like they're still better than me, I was like, man, I'm getting a lot closer to where I want to be than I thought I was.
It's nice to be edified, like within yourself. Like simple one for me is like I'm not necessarily gonna climb with them and whatever, but like sometimes just at a comp, I'll watch you guys. I'll give you an example. Watch 3-4 guys go, and I'm like, why is nobody going through this crotch first and then going down? And then I'll watch like you or Mark or you or whatever, and they'll go, and I'm like, well, there it is. So I'm like, at least I'm thinking like that. In my mind, I'm like, I'm seeing it that way.
At this year's international, I was sitting, and it was what's his name? Sean Welsh was right behind me, and he goes, I don't know. He's like, look at the limb walk. There's another limb beside. He's like, I don't know why anybody hasn't tried to go out that limb. The next climber, the last climber is Barton Allen Hall, and he goes out the limb beside it.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, he saw it too. He's like, I was seeing something that was legit. He's like, maybe when you get in the tree, you can't do it.
Yeah.
But no, he saw something. It was like exactly what you said.
Which is a really, and I would encourage the listeners to even take that to be the learning lesson, even though you didn't do the physical thing. Because if you can start mentally and visually see something, and it's confirmed by somebody who is good at the craft, like that's a win.
That's big time.
If you can conceive it and perceive it, you can achieve it.
That's a tongue twister that I'll never try.
It's hard. Yeah, it's come on, what is it? What's the book?
Honestly,
Norman Vincent Peale.
Oh, okay. The Power of Positive Thinking.
I think that's what it is.
All right,
I
I'll
believe
take
so.
that. Was, dude. You know what's, what's crazy?
Connecting on a whole other level right now.
Exactly.
What's crazy is that's actually my very first. That's literally my very first like self-development book that I ever read.
Okay.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Aging Arborist podcast. Brick and I are super excited that you're here joining us. Please like and subscribe and share with a friend if you think they'd benefit. And now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, which is awesome. I'm going to get back to you on that real quick.
Yeah.
Just to kick, we're getting back into it. We're talking about Think and Grow Rich. That's the name of
Holy
it.
in hell.
Yes, and I think that was the name of it.
Yeah.
And the reason we bring it up is you said, can you repeat that please?
What you can conceive and what you can perceive, you can achieve.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
it starts in the mind.
Yeah.
So even those victories, excuse me, even those victories where, those victories where we're just my mic here. Those victories that are mental, where we're looking at someone at a comp and we're planning a route and no one sees, and then someone sees and doesn't. It's a high level person, and you're like, yeah, you should feel good about that. Yeah. Or even just working. If I'm working with you. It was cool. We haven't had a chance to work together a lot, but I do remember the one job there was like silver maple pruning, and I took down a couple.
Yeah, you were doing
honey locust removals.
Big oak removal.
Well, there was one that
There
was one climbing one in West Deptford a couple of years ago, and you and I went out, and it was just, I forget who was on the job. I don't think Mason was there. Maybe one of my daughters or something, but
yeah, Michaela
anyway,
worked with us.
It was fun. It was, we slayed stuff. It was cool.
Yeah,
it's neat to do that with a friend, someone that you like, that you admire, that you,
which is exactly the point that you just made. That if you have that opportunity to really jump in on crews that have I would say higher caliber worker, climber, however you want to call it, So
in sports, it's always saying you compete with someone better than you, because then you'll get better as well.
Level up.
You always try to compete up a level, and then same goes with tree work. I mean, try to find those that you say are better than you, or but just working with others in general is inspiring. Like as a contract climber now, I don't get the opportunity to climb with others as often. So when I do, it is so much fun to double up a tree with somebody else, and not that I'm focused on what they're doing, but just knowing they're in the tree with me, and every once in a while I'm being like, oh man, they're all the way out there, cool, that's awesome. Well, I remember climbing with Mike Ferrick. I brought him up a couple of times already, and he really was one of the bigger inspirations for me. But I got to climb a lot of trees with him at Arborist Enterprises together, and it would be wild. I'd look over, and he'd be at the top of one thing, and then next time I look over, he's at the bottom, and next time the top over there. And I would ask him, I was like, dude, you're all over the place. Next, I look at you one time, you're at the top. Next time at the bottom. Next time, doesn't it feel like. Shouldn't you be working more of a flow?
Are you planning your route, dude, or what?
So he was the first one that said, well, I do it more in a column. So he said, I work from top to bottom in this section, and I go back up to the top for a whole nother section. It was more like you do the top of the tree, then you kind of do the tree in levels of top, middle, bottom. And even as I say that, it doesn't make sense to me now, because that's not how tie-in points work. The tree isn't open to allow that. So when he broke it down, it was like, well, I'm working a column. I work everything I can off of this tie-in point. And then that was reiterated into me by Jim Roach as well, because when I got into the competitions and was starting to do fairly well, I missed the Masters, when I was first starting to get to that level. And so I helped Roach set one up, and he was sort of said something is you get everything you can from the tie-in point, because even if I think it'll be easier from over there, he's like, but then maybe you don't have to tie in over there. You can skip that one and tie into this point, because you've already got the low stuff from this tie-in point that you were able to get. And that. So you get everything you can
100%
from that tie-in point. And that sort of broke it into columns as well, and really changed. And then for moving rope, I would start to understand how a ponytail redirect could really help you, because you can work top to bottom on this side, ponytail it over your whole system on the other side of this one stem that kept you working this way. And now, whether you want to work from bottom up or just go up to the top and work it down again, there's that potential. And so that was sort of, even before I started SRT, it started formulating the way I thought about how to break down a tree when pruning.
That's cool.
Or removals.
It takes me back. Like, it's weird because I don't even know what things are called. Like, I didn't know that was called a ponytail until you were like, do this. I'm like, oh. But that reminds me, just taking me back to my first job in Haddonfield.
That's going fast.
I know. So that was about when
those memories.
Yeah, it was after the flood. It was after the flood.
Well, when there's that, right?
That's it. But no, like I learned a lot of the breaking trees down to big pin oaks, because you have this like radial branch pattern.
Yeah.
And you're trying to be like super efficient, and like all these limbs are in your way. And I can remember doing that, like going and just working like a third of the tree this way. Yeah. And then going up, and you'd find like that big limb or top because you're on this side of the fork, and then lanyard in, pull your rig through. And so it's taking me back in my mind to like when all that kind of.
Yeah. The ponytail redirect, I learned that at a competition and then tried it in the competition the same day I learned it.
Oh, wow.
I screwed it up. I lanyarded it in between it so that I like pulled it up, realized I couldn't pull it down because it was trapped in my lanyard, had to reset it. Judges were like, are you sure you know what you're doing? Yeah.
Kind of.
Just watch. Yeah. Just give me a couple minutes.
I think that was my first work climb, and I didn't get all the bells. I skipped a station to be able to get out of the tree in time because I wanted I wanted to do the landing. You know,
well,
it was so
let
cool.
me just, and this is where we go into the listeners. If you're going to do a competition, you had trained for the competition, you do not do anything new on the day of the competition.
Or use new gear. Yeah, you don't use new gear or try something new. Never.
No,
it won't work like it works in your head.
No.
It's crazy.
And competitions will always bring out what you need. Like, if you don't have it down just right, you're going to find that out at a competition.
Always.
I remember one of my first masters forgetting how to tie a running bowline at the top of the tree and having to try 3 times for my tie-in. I'm like...
frustrated.
Oh, just like, why can't I do this?
You can't.
But then you like stress and try to do it fast again. You're like, nope, did it wrong again.
Wow.
I'm always amazed when someone says, how do you tie that? And I have to still kind of tie it.
So that because it's automatic these days now is sometimes someone will ask you a basic question. You're like, how do I do that? Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I know how. I just do it off of instinct.
That's funny because this brought us back. This takes me into a rabbit hole we were on another podcast where I talked about breaking down technique. And I specifically went into felling because Mason was like, hey, can you show me some like finer points of felling? Well, obviously I've been doing it for years, but also had the benefit of doing with Nats, I did a 60-hour train the trainer course. And it was one of the most influential things I've done. One of the best training experiences I've had being on the trained end. And I had to kind of go back with Mason and go, all right, like how do I, talking about, like gunning and like, setting up your felling plan and your hinge. But it was a really good exercise for me to have to go back and go, why does this work? How does this work? Rather than just going by muscle memory. We kind of dug into that with Mark on episode 1. Like, I feel like muscle memory is good, but also it can be bad. And you even hit on it when we were talking about going from one type of system to another. You feel your body want to do these things, and your body's like, oh, this is what we do. And you're like, yeah, but I'm trying to teach you this over here. So
breaking muscle memory is tough.
Difficult.
I mean, that's why like getting in the habit of one-handing a chainsaw or cutting without chaps is so hard to break.
Yeah.
Even though you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
If that's how you first learned, it's so ingrained in you. It goes back to it. It really took me a while to break the one-handing.
Yeah.
And wearing chaps regularly. Luckily, the chainsaw pants make it a lot easier.
No doubt.
And then Yeah, I made a point to not one-hand, and then I think I went almost a solid 10 years without one-handing. And I'll tell you one thing, when you work at a company, and like I was did safety and training at Goods, you hold yourself to a standard because you know people are watching you. When I became a contract climber, it's amazing how many bad habits when I first started climbing that came back up because I didn't feel that people are watching me as closely, or this is more about production than it is about teaching. So and like every once in a while I catch myself in that position of like, why did I one hand my saw there? There was really no need. It didn't benefit me, and I shouldn't feel more comfortable in that sort of deal.
It is interesting. The program is the word I'm thinking of. When the programming, like, and I hate it, but it's true. It's like a default.
Oh yeah.
Like it's always there, So at some point in my reading, as I read a lot, learned that the way it works is that essentially, if you think of like a record, like when they make a record, there's in the wax they make the lines, and then the record when you play it, it's just going through the lines. When you learn something, that's what's happening in your brain. There's a groove there. That groove never goes away. Even if you learn a new habit, the new habit's next to it.
Correct.
Right.
But it always wants to revert back to that one. So that's why nobody's watching. It's like, this is comfortable. This is more comfortable than the other way because the other way is new. This is the original plan.
I find it mostly for myself, it's laziness.
Lazy, but laziness. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Laziness is comfort.
Can be. I don't know. Sometimes when I go, like, I've caught myself one-handing occasionally now.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily make me feel more comfortable.
No.
I feel like it's a little bit of a laziness for me.
Okay. Just laziness. Yeah.
Yeah. I see what you're saying with that, though, for sure.
You know what I mean, though, right? Like,
yeah.
So, like, for example, and this is simple, but let's say you're climbing, you have to get into a position to use two hands, and that would require to use a second piece of rope.
Right, yeah.
But you're like, I can do it without the second piece of rope.
Yeah.
It's just more comfortable. It's less work. It's just easier. It's just comfortable.
Yeah, I'd say that my bad habit with that would be not lanyarding in for cuts.
Oh,
okay. I have some reasons why I do it in certain situations.
Absolutely.
And in other ones, it is a comfort lazy, like just, I'm so comfortable. Like I don't need to lanyard in when I make this cut. But then the other side of it, not to give an excuse, but there are times where I had an accident that happened where I was lanyarded into a big lead and we were roping it off, but it was a big cut and I lanyarded in just under the cut, but the piece came off before I was finished cutting and it ripped out and pulled my lanyard and really pulled me in. And I saw a bad video recently of a guy doing that, like taking a whole tree from 10 feet up and it caught his lanyard. Yeah. And so, like, when we talk about felling trees, you always talk about having an escape route. You get away from that cut because that's where it's the most dangerous. And I've thought about that when we're in a tree. We talk about lanyarding in for safety of making the cut, but in certain circumstances, don't we need an exit route? And by using a lanyard, you can minimize that exit, where maybe a second tie-in point where you can release and then rappel out, but your lanyard's only so long or something. So there are situations that I put myself in where I actually do feel more comfortable and safer without my lanyard because of the potential, and that I would like an escape route. Like, sometimes it's ducking behind a lead or something like that, or being able to maneuver. So you already have it planned out.
Yeah, sure.
But like, I've always found that interesting. We talk about felling, you have to have an escape route. And then we get in a tree making a big cut and we're attached to that.
That's an interesting.
And it's like, that's interesting.
It is.
It's really interesting. When do we find when it's beneficial and when it's not?
Yeah, no, like you use a dichotomy. It's a dichotomy. But I will say, and I know you know this, but in what you just explained, I'm in agreement with you, but you also have to realize that right then and there, you're not being complacent. you're being so thoughtful
Yes.
and conscious of all these variables that are
Agreed.
involved. And unfortunately, the rules that are there, they're there for a reason, for a general idea.
Yeah.
But you're going to run into a situation where it's like,
I think that's one of the things I like so much about this job in this industry is you will never, and I don't know any other industry that's quite this same way. You will never run into the same situation twice.
Agree.
You can climb the same tree 2 years in a row, but you're going to have a different goal because the same dead limb is not there for you to go get. The same thinning cut is not there for you to go get. So you might tie into the same thing, but you work the tree differently because the goal's differently. You can't remove the same tree twice. You can have very similar trees. You can do the same thing, but you can never do the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. So every situation we run into has to be treated uniquely and for that specific scenario. And so we can create rules and things that you have to follow, but there's always going to be that exception to it. And that's what makes me think about what you were just touching on there is I'm not necessarily being complacent because it's thought through. And that's what I find so unique, and where you talked about hitting lulls in this, but like in this industry, and you do, but it is unique in that you have to constantly be thinking. You have to constantly, you can't do it always the same way. Sometimes there's different factors, different wood types, different fiber holds, like every tree has to be like in trees side by side. You climb an oak, one's dead, or both are dead, but they react different. Mm-hmm. Like every tree you're learning with that first cut. 100%. And like people are like, oh man, how much do you consider the type of tree you're climbing to the cut you make or something like this? And I was like, I'll tell you what, that first cut is the most educational for me. And I try not to make the big cut first because it's going to tell me something. Yeah. Is this tree going to pop today? Is this going to hold today? You know, sometimes the weather affects that. Like if we've had a lot of rain and you're doing a crane job, know the pieces are going to be a little heavier. That wood's taking up a lot of moisture. The weight on leaves, something that I learned over the last, I think it was this past year. It rained in the morning, and my picks were not coming off clean. And I was like, why? Yeah. But it was the rain on the leaves creating tip weight that I really wasn't considering.
You mean like actually laying on them?
No, it was literally laying the dew and and the raindrops, and it blew my mind how much that changed the balance of a lead. Where in the morning my picks were coming off really funky because it was misting, light rain the whole morning, and then as soon as it stopped, I did make adjustments so that they were coming off clean, but then in the afternoon it was back to like normal. A tree in the dry conditions because the breeze picked up a little bit, blew the moisture off the leaves.
Crazy.
You know, that's something awesome. I wouldn't think
so
about.
Cool, though,
that's so
but
awesome.
Like
it is
ash. I do a lot of crane jobs on ash. Tops are dead. If you see some green suckers lower, that wood is going to be a whole different weight than the top of the tree, even within the same tree itself. A dead lead versus one with a little bit of green. And trust me, from experience, even though the ash are dead and dying back, if there's some suckers, that wood is still pulling up moisture and it's still going to be a lot heavier than if it was fully dead. And there's been some picks where, you know, the crane operator and I are giving feedback and it's like, man, I'm really surprised how heavy that was. It's like, oh yeah, well, it did have some sucker growth on it still, so I guess it was still pulling up moisture.
Still green,
Didn't really factor that in. Like those are things that like change. Jobs constantly changing. Every time,
every cut, every move, everything. No, I'm with you. And I talk with the guy working with Desmond, and the way you just talked. I hope everybody that's listening can actually hear what you're saying while you're talking. Meaning, you didn't say anything like, you just go up there, you put your lane, you just make a cut. Like you literally just talk about all the variables that are involved, and then in a way you're like in this like poetic movie. You know, like if there was a cameraman who's like Steven Spielberg would listen to what you said and make a video of what you said, it would not look like a guy cutting a tree.
Right.
It would be like it's raining, and rain lands on the leaves, and then the tree bends over a little bit, and then it would come to you visualizing all that, and then making the right cut to the right place. It would be this beautiful poetic thing that happened. And the reason why I feel like that's so awesome and important is because my thing is everything you do, every cut you make, every move you make, you're taking a test, and you want to get 100% on your test every time. At no point do you go, I've done this test before.
I average a 90.
Oh, that dude, and 90
Hey, man.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good, but even the idea of 90, and I'll ask you a question: are you okay with 90, or do you want 100?
I want to pass every single time because every test, I know
what I mean?
Realistically I'm not getting 100% right. But it's judging what you got wrong and taking that information to the next one.
Exactly, and that's my point. You're always aiming for 100.
Right.
At no point you're like 90 is good enough, because 90 now becomes 80.
Right.
And 80
if you're
becomes
just
60.
Looking to pass every time,
At some point,
but I want to pass with flying colors, right?
Exactly. And how you described the whole thing, I'm like, he's trying to ace the test. You know, like you made your first cut. You're like, I can't believe the rain weight on leaves at the end of this limb is affecting what I normally think would happen. I can see it.
Really wild to me. I mean, that was a huge tree, and we had a big crane. And he told me he was good for 13,000, I believe. And the first one, I'm like, probably 6. Came off at like 8 or 9. And I'm like, and he even said, as he pulled the piece out, the crane operator's like, I can't believe it's that heavy. And I was like, well, I think we're gonna have to take this rain into a little bit more consideration, which played a huge factor that morning, as it rained all morning and then stopped. So the afternoon changed it, but. Like, it changed size of picks I was making as we were getting further away, and he wasn't good for that 13,000, and we were still off. I would say our first 2 to 3 picks, we were off by close to 1,000 to 2,000, which when you're talking weights and crane, that's a big difference. Like, you're not talking 1 to 2%, you're talking like 20% different.
Yeah.
You know? And so again, going back to, you got to judge everything by your first cut almost. Even if you know the tree and the type of tree and all that, first cut changes everything. And then take that information and start dialing it in. And like, so if we talk about taking a test and maybe I scored a 70%, but it was passing. But the next one, I had to take that information. We got up to an 80%, and we're getting better and better with each pick.
Yes.
Closer to being perfect. Sir, I don't think I ever get it 100%. Maybe I've hit it 100% once or twice, but you know, there's always that room for improvement. And I think that's, again, another neat thing about this job is that with elements changing and things changing all the time, you constantly have to be striving for that perfection, otherwise you're just going to fall off the mark.
Yeah, you're going to get hurt.
Man.
It's so wild. Like, he's talking.
What's it? Mic drop.
Can't go anywhere from here. We're out.
No, it's just spot on, man. I love it. Yeah,
I love so much about that last piece of dialogue. Like, I can see me. I'll be re-listening to that multiple times. But the hard thing for me is he's on a riff. Like, he's riffing. And I'm having a hard time being quiet because I'm so excited about what he's saying. I want to just chime in.
Me too. Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, he just needs to roll. He's on. Just let the man roll. And then for you to summarize talking about like Steven Spielberg and it's poetry and it's, but I definitely think, because as you're talking, I'm processing all what you're saying and I'm going, yeah, which is so on the works. Whoa. On the work side of it, it's like I'm thinking about, okay, like I'm doing a rigging situation. I'll get up, I'll get set up, and I'll say to my guys, hey, I'm just going to put something in the system here, the first cut. I'm not going to go nuts. There's a big why. I could cut it here, but you know what? I'm learning. What does it weigh? How's it going to move? How do they respond? How do they land it? All that. But on the side of like you talked about working in columns, I'm thinking a couple things. I'm thinking wood, species, fibers, dead, alive, like almost like this flow chart or these columns of information and knowledge that we gain experientially. Species of tree, weather conditions, dead, alive. And we just have this database in our head that you're not applying any of it the same every time, but you're drawing from that sort of same bag of experiential stuff, rope angles, where I'm setting things, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I've just gotten in the habit over the years, like every time I use a device, I put some type of ring as a fair lead into the device just to make it simple for the guys. They're not chasing weird angles. And that's just something simple that I would think most people would do, or just make sure, so that's part of it. And now I'm kind of going on a little bit of a rant.
That's beautiful.
But
we'll stop you when we feel the need.
But also, I feel like, and I don't want to label this like attention deficit. Like I'm not a label guy, but I'll say it and people will know what I mean. I think that is those of us that are attracted and stay in the industry. It's that newness daily that keeps you kind of hooked in. Yeah. It's a new adventure every day.
Yeah, I see where you tied in the ADHD there. Like, I mean, when you have that short attention span and everything's changing all the time,
it keeps you engaged.
Every day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think, and maybe we're making a discovery here. You guys tell me what you think. Some of those lulls, do you think they can happen when we feel like we've been repeating a similar task over and over?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think it's within, I think that to get so deeply immersed in this industry, you do have to enjoy that constant change, and almost like a short attention span kind of deal is that we're always grabbed by a new detail or something like that, is when we fall into those those laws are created sometimes by our lack of interest, or it's become too regular, it's become too patterned, it's become... I mean, that's where we become complacent. I mean, I've had 2 injuries this year, and I would say they directly related to being complacent. Yeah.
You want to expand?
Yeah, I can talk about them. One was in tree work, and one wasn't. The tree work one was put on social media thanks to a funny little picture from it. But I had... And this is an embarrassing thing too, so I'll just say it.
No, I appreciate it.
We'll get through it.
Yeah.
But I do the crane seminar every year, Crane Safety Climber School. Awesome event, probably one of the greatest hands-on learning events there is. Super fun to be a part of that. So we had just done that, really motivated coming out of it. That's another event that always inspires you. Even as a teacher, I'd say I've learned more teaching there about crane work and stuff as anywhere else. So it was right after that, and I'm working with a super crew, Mike Tatey, Tucker, who I think I mentioned earlier, who's kind of got him re-expired, and it's been fun to watch him. And then the crane man and Pete was running the crane, and we're doing a large double stem oak behind another tree, so every pick was going to be blind. Pretty much every pick was going to be blind that day. Pete couldn't see me. And I'm working with this crew that I'm super comfortable with. So... just rolling through the job. We're doing a lot of chatting, so maybe not as focused as I am on some, because I'm having a great time with the crew. And so picked out all the brush on one of the leads, moved to the far lead. I had to basically pick the top and then one more lead after that, and we were just down to wood, and we were crushing it. It was like 10:30.
Wow.
Job's going awesome. I rig up the top. I rappel down, get into my position, and one thing that I teach at that crane seminar, and I say, hey, try not to block the crane operator's view, and whenever possible, don't be between the pick and the crane, because cranes get stronger by bringing a pick into themselves. Okay. You always want to use the crane in the strongest capacity, so naturally the movement of a piece, first instinct is going to be bringing it into themselves. So escape routes, we talked about that with felling and stuff. Put yourself in a good position where it's the least likely to go, or where you're safest. When I rappelled out of it, I looked up and I went to go make my cut, and I was like, I'm kind of in a bad spot. I'm between the pick and the crane, even though he can't see me. And actually that probably is even more of a time to stay out of that, because he's going to be relying mostly on instinct. At that point, bringing it into himself. And I thought about it. I'm on the wrong side to make this cut. Getting a little complacent, working with a really good crew, feeling really good. We're crushing the job. I said, since I know that I'm in a bad spot, if I finish the cut, take a step down and tell him it's free, I've got my scrape. escape zone and stuff. Okay. Well, I cut through it. I was small barring it. I prefer a smaller bar, lighter. I'm a little bit more maneuverable in the tree, but my bar didn't quite reach out the backside of it. Okay. So as I stepped down to get out of the way of it, my saw got pinched, not finishing the cut. I had to re-step back up into that zone where I knew the piece was going to come off at. And I did. I knew that's how it was going to go off. I should have at that point then rotated to the back to be in my best position, but there was a couple of limbs that I really would have had to work around. So being complacent, being a little bit lazy, I just stepped back in and was instructing Pete how to get it, to move the piece so I could get my saw out. Okay. And it was one of those situations where as I got my saw out, the piece also came free. Oh. And because I had taken that step back up, where I knew the piece was going to come off, I put myself in the zone that pick came. So because he had moved a little bit out of center to help me get my saw unstuck, meant there was a little bit more movement in that piece than would have been if had just finished. Yep. So the piece came right at me, and I put my forearm up to block it, kind of protect my body. And the saw was in my left hand, not running, chain brakes on. And everything kind of got pushed back towards me. And I was able to deflect and push the piece around. Now, it was pretty big. I would have said between 4,000 and 5,000 pound top. We had good capacity, well within our capacity. I think he was good for 7 or at that point or something like that. But being such a big piece in oak, which is very hard, that piece, as it skipped over my forearm, cut me open in 2 places. So it split me.
Oh, the wood did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. I thought it was the chainsaw teeth.
So we did originally think that might have been it, because the saw kind of got pushed back towards me. But as I really sort of divulged into, remembering it, and then also inspecting everything, so it came back at me. I pushed it around. I looked down, saw blood. Thought it was a small cut or whatever. Seeing blood isn't the worst thing. I mean, I've seen plenty of blood myself up in a tree before from small nicks and cuts. And so I looked at it again. I was like, oh, crap. I cut myself. I said it across the headset. And Pete goes, is it bad? I said, bad enough that I think I might need stitches. I'm coming to the ground. Okay. So he's in the middle of maneuvering that. I just had really taken a quick look at it, got in position to rappel out of the tree, unlanyarded, started rappelling out, kind of took another look, and I said as I'm rappelling down, I said, hey, can you tell the guys to get a blood stopper kit? I think let's stop the bleeding. Yeah. So super responsive, great crew. Even though I was being complacent because I was such a good crew, I also was very appreciative that was the crew I was with when something like that happened, because I got to the ground and Mike already had the first aid kit ready and a compression bandage. Nice. I mean, it was perfect thing for the thing. The guys responded amazingly. So right as he put it on, I said, hey, Mike, could you put eyes on that as well? Do you think I need stitches? And he said, yeah, it looks pretty bad. Probably stitches. At least go to the hospital. So that's what it was. But the whole funny picture online, sort of, I know myself. I'm a bit of a fainter in when things happen. Like, not instantly, but I do have a history of passing out. And I don't it's not the sight of blood that gets me, but knowing it's leaving my body, I can feel it like all but drain out of my head. So I used to have blood taken when I was younger for really bad acne and some medicine that I was on for it. But every single time they took blood, I passed out. So I told Mike this. I said, hey, I'm a fainter. And I'm on the headset, so Pete hears it as well. Oh, boy. It's a bit of a joke. Laugh about it a little bit. He bandaged me up, and I was like, yep.
I'm going down.
I can feel it. Man down. I was like, I'm gonna sit down. I sat down against the tree, and then I can tell you the moment I'm about to pass out. Basically,
that's wild. Yeah.
So I said, Mike, I'm gonna lay down now because I think I'm about to pass out, and I did. Yeah. Pete took a great little picture of it. It's hilarious. Yeah. Mike's over me, stroking my beard. You're gonna be all right, Derrick. You're gonna be all right. I I know. But
great.
it's great to be with the guys
Oh,
that,
yeah.
one, in a very serious thing that we can take it super
No
serious,
doubt.
but also have fun in those moments, knowing that, I was going to be safe. It was going to be fine. Maybe a couple stitches. Didn't even get stitches. Just to have some nice scars.
Butterfly, yeah.
Yeah, they don't do that, and
yeah.
whatever. I thought I needed stitches. Yeah, they said you can get around it.
Cool.
If I would have known that, might not have went.
Hey, man,
But,
it's all
hey.
good. You got to get it checked out.
You do.
I mean, a big takeaway for me, just I first of all, I appreciate the candor, and I think the listeners will appreciate the candor. A lot of times I think learning can stop and can be inhibited by ego, right? Guys are afraid to share. You're at an event, something's going on, all these high level people like these super crews or whatever, and you're thinking, so we need to make it okay to talk about these things. This is how we learn and grow and develop. And I think it you being able to be vulnerable in that and just tell the story, even to the part of where you got a little lightheaded or whatever. I think that's super important because people need permission, like to go, hey, I screwed up, I messed up, I don't get 100% on the test every time. So these conversations,
I got a failing result on that.
these dialogues,
not failing because you're still alive.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Just saying. I have a whole theory behind it, but yeah.
But these dialogues are important for that reason.
And just to jump on that, like I totally agree. I'm sure you do too. I think the people that are really passionate and involved maybe some of them don't have a problem articulating this. I think it really comes down to the people with the bravado.
Yeah.
Are the ones, it's like, listen, man, the amount, I think it's fair to say the amount of time you've been doing it has no skin in the game. We should be looking at it that it's our first day every time, right? Yeah. So if you can do that, look at it that way, then when you have a mistake, you can share that mistake because, and I'd love to think that it will help somebody else.
Oh, of course. That's the reason you talk.
Exactly. And I got a DM a DM from somebody I don't know, reached out. Yep, this is last night. Hey, Brick, what's up? What's going on? I got. How do you deal with the fear of heights? I have this big tree job tomorrow. I'd love to hear your input on it. And I'm just like, dang. I'm like, all right.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It is because fear of heights. I never had that issue.
Really?
Never.
I did.
Oh, you? Okay.
Yeah, it was something I had to overcome when I first got into it because I'm not naturally the type of person that can walk up to the edge of a building and just stand on the edge and look over.
Yeah.
It's my comfortability with the heights came with getting comfortable in the gear and then becoming comfortable with the tree, which was the last part because I got another unique thing about tree work that I don't know any other industry has is we don't have rated tie-offs.
No,
we don't know the numbers of anything. Rope access work, they have rated tie-offs. They have rated anchors. Like industrial, everything we know to at least a close degree. Tree work,
none.
So many factors too. Like you have included bark. That changes how much that branch can hold. Mm-hmm. A squirrel's nest or not a nest, a hole,
woodpecker hole,
decay or something changes it. Mm-hmm. And so not just knowing what we can tie into, but getting comfortable in knowing trees and how we can tie into. And actually, for me, it has gotten to the point where it is hard for me to tie in with just a single canopy anchor or in a moving rope system anymore because I'm relying on one anchor point where I have gotten so comfortable with like a canna-base anchor or a basal anchor where I can back things up and create vector forces and use different things that I understand with ropes and forces and manipulate angles and stuff like that to feel way more comfortable than a single anchor point that I don't know the rating for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really sketches me out to be tied into one thing now.
See, on that alone, I still do this to this day. I always take. So I see a union, I take the one lower, basal if I can, whatever. But and I always immediately go up there to inspect the tie-in point area. I do not do any tree work without doing that first because of that reason.
So one of the things I like so much about canna-base anchoring into a tree is Well, one is a contract climber working with a different crew every day. I don't trust the base anchor anymore because there's too many factors that are exposed to outside elements outside of your control. Sure. And I had to learn that the hard way on a job, not falling out of a tree or anything, but running into a situation where my basal anchor was exposed to an inexperienced crew, and I felt very vulnerable. So one, moving your anchor into the top of the tree, but then the canna-base part of it where you advance as if you were in a basal anchor and then feel comfortable backing myself up, changing angles and all that. But the other part of that is it really forced me to not aim for my tie-in point, but aim to something beefier just below. Yep. One, it improved production because it's easier to hit a big union than your final tie-in point, which is, we're talking about size of a wrist or just slightly bigger. The other part of that is you can't inspect that from the ground, but a big union has a much bigger safety factor in it. So even if there are hollows or a bad branch union, we know that something like 4 inches or greater is pretty bomber, unless there's a lot of factors going into that. But even something dead at 4 inches, I'm pretty confident in it. I mean, that'd be my rigging point in most trees. So so to force you to tie into that gets you in the tree quicker, but then you get that added benefit of now being able to further inspect your actual tie-in points when you're setting. I do try to work a decent amount on the way up, but that also gives me the confidence. The times where I hit, sometimes you aim for that union and you hit the really high one and you just you're like, ooh, I hit my tie-in point right off the ground. Yeah. But that's in the back of my head that I haven't inspected that, honestly. Yeah. So it limits my work on the way up, or maybe not against the trunk, but hey, I only have to, limb walk that one limb to get that one piece of dead, and I'd rather get it on the way up. But the way I'm loading that top, or I'm not around the vertical, I'm around a horizontal, changes my mindset a little bit.
And that's good. It is good. Yeah, it's good that you're aware of it. Let's put it that way. But that's, I don't know how you're thinking, but I have to, I think it's fair to say, I have to climb with a peace of mind.
Okay, yeah.
I have to. So I have to go up there. I'm like, I'm not trying to get that one limb, because in the back of my head, I'm like, I didn't really check that. So I'm like, forget it. I'm going all the way up there, inspecting it. Once that's set, and then it fails, I'm cool. I'm good with dying at this point. I know it sounds stupid.
You made your decisions.
But I did everything I could possibly do. So if it fails, there's nothing I can do about it at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I understand. I totally agree with what you're saying, and I get it. For me personally, I'm like, nah, I'm inspecting everything, and then I just freely go about my business.
There's a big efficiency. Mark was one of the guys that really told me that he goes to the top almost instead of doing work on the way up. Okay. And this was years ago, so maybe he's changed his approach. But I remember him saying that, and he really was like, I can break a tree down so much better from the top, looking down on it and knowing the routes I take. When I try to work on the way up, unless it's very specific, you can kind of get lost. And I found that, I found if I try to work on the way up, sometimes I'm not working very efficiently. Going to the top and working down where you can really set a plan, and then downhill climbing is so much easier than uphill climbing, There
you go. Yeah.
So using that, seeing the better angles, setting yourself up for that instead of taking a tie-in point and trying to make it work on the way up. Yeah. Sometimes you feel like you're being more efficient because you're doing work on the way up, but I think going to the top and working down almost always is the quicker way of doing tree work.
So the time trade-off is worth it.
Yeah, what I try to do on the way up, when I say I like to do work on the way up, is you find most of your bigger cuts, your chainsaw cuts, are going to happen at the base or on the main trunk. So those are the cuts I try to make on the way up. So now I can really concentrate on getting good redirects to really be able to make it easy to get out limbs. And you find with a redirect that's pretty far out, it's easy to work out from a redirect, but it's actually kind of hard to work in from a redirect. So if you have a redirect that puts you 2/3 of the way out a limb, but you need to get that big cut back against the base. Sometimes that's actually kind of hard to get to.
You're fighting your redirect.
So if I can make those cuts on the way up, it allows me to focus just on a different aspect of the tree. And each tree, we talked about it, is going to be different, and every tree has to be approached differently. But those are what I'm like, okay, if I can open up the inside, one, I might have a zone to throw things down, so that things aren't getting stuck. And then to that point too, if I don't have an open spot to throw down, I'm throwing to my next place I'm going. Mark Powell was the one who really put this in my head, and I'd never thought about it before. When pruning, if you don't have a good drop zone or a good place to throw things, throw it into the next area to get caught up. So throw it lower in the canopy at a thick point of the tree where it's like, it'll never make it down. Great. Cool. Then I go down there where I'm going to do work anyway. And it's a much easier throw, or a much easier to get the piece out. And I was like, I never thought of that before. That was cool. He put that in my head.
It's like a placeholder.
I was like, I got to go there next. Just throw it into that area.
Beautiful.
But don't throw it into an area you already pruned unless you know it's going to make it to the ground, because I don't want to have to go back.
I like throwing things at it. Like if it gets fetched. Taking the nub, or like leave a hook and see if I can. There it goes.
Oh, that's so much fun. That is really rewarding.
It's like a boardwalk.
It's like a
boardwalk game.
Throw ball that out. I'm like, not if I hit it with this.
And then sometimes you're the only one that sees it, and you're like,
oh, I know.
No,
like that was cool.
Free, you definitely look around like,
oh, darn it.
But in your mind, you're just like, I'm just like, that was cool. That was fun. Yeah,
that was genius.
Yeah. The little victories in life, which is really
the other ones I get a kick out of that is when you finish this, like you make your cut, and then you go to make your final cut, and you make it, and you can either just like flick it with the saw, or like you make it and catch it on the bar.
Oh, you're talking about the notch.
The little nub or the notch. When you want to control that.
We are officially nerding out.
Oh,
we are totally
very much. I got my Steve Urkel suspender.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
No, totally. That's how you keep it inspiring.
Oh yeah.
It's like, can I do that thing I did last time? You can cut in the balance on the bar and flick it.
Oh yeah.
The game's
knowing if you cut with the top of the bar, it's shooting it that way. Bottom, it's pulling it into me.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You have a segue point? You want to jump in?
No.
I do want to ask you, because I never, for all the years I've known you, I've never got to know how you got into trees.
Oh, okay. So this is a story I've told a couple of times, and I like it. So when I got out of high school, I've always liked working outside, and I've had a history of working with plants from my uncle having a greenhouse and working in that when I was in high school. And then when I got out of high school, I worked for a landscaper from the church that I went to, and was fortunate to work with a guy who was really good. Like when we talk about certified arborists and stuff, he was that standard within the landscape industry. He would have been on the board and stuff like that. So he did things really well. Cool. And so he was the first one that taught me pruning cuts, and he taught me proper pruning cuts, which I was later impressed with, knowing that it was coming from a landscaper. But he subbed in a tree guy, my first boss, Brian Weaver, Climb High Tree Service, to do some removals around a mall that we maintained. I was the foreman for that maintenance crew at the mall. And from what I remember, and Brian doesn't quite recall it the same way I do, it wasn't a very big tree, but he had to rope a piece out over the sidewalk, and it was a piece of wood. It wasn't huge, but big enough. And he was just doing it to not damage the sidewalk. And he put a rope on it. He's like, "You got it?" I said something like, "Yeah." And I don't know what my thought process was, but I walked under to go grab something as he was making the cut. He thought I was on rope when he said, "Are you ready?" He thought I was on rope. So he made the cut as I walked under, and this piece of wood fell down. Again, it wasn't huge, but big enough that it would hurt me pretty good.
It would have done something bad.
Fell pretty much right behind me. Not like within inches, but like, he's like, "I thought you were on rope." I was like, "Oh, I thought you meant it's okay, like, to go under." Like, I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was like a mistake was made, breakdown in communication. I was like, man, this is dangerous. Like, you get to climb trees for a living, and this is kind of wild. This is fun. I could see myself doing this. Then took a break, did a year of college. I was really into math, so I was like, changed my major to be a math major, and lost all my credits just because I was originally there for business, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's go call that tree guy. That looked fun. Get paid to climb trees for a little while. I was like, cool, let's do it. So I cold called him and was like, hey, you need somebody? He was a small company, had just lost his guy, so his brother was helping him till he found someone else. 2-man company, me and him. That's how I started. It was like an obsession from almost day one.
That's awesome.
Like it was pretty cool to see it. And from what I remember of that day when he subbed with us, we did this little removal. I want to say it was like a crab apple or something along the building that we had to rig a little bit out. Then we did a big pine tree in an open area, and that was a big flop. And so that was a cool thing for me to see too. I wasn't exposed to chainsaws at all up to that point. And so it was just like all these new things for me to learn, which was very exciting for me as a young guy with a ton of energy. Yeah. I forget what part of the conversation we were talking about earlier, but I remember doing work for college years after I've been in tree work, and one of my junior high youth leaders worked at the college now too, and I got to talk with her a little bit, introduced her to the crew, and she's like, you have no idea. This is the perfect job for Derrick. We didn't know what to do with his energy level when he was in the youth group. And they didn't. And like, I had insane, like, you talk about bouncing off the walls. That's the kind of energy in college. Right before I started tree work, I was on the volleyball club, and I would literally run back and jump off the walls and see how high I could touch, and then run the other wall, and I'd just be running back and forth, bouncing off walls with the amount of energy I had.
Yeah, I love
so
it.
Tree work was like, bam,
it's a natural flow.
so many things to try to take in and learn things, and then I was an athletic kid, took to things pretty easily, oftentimes, and tree work. Having to get over that fear of heights, having to trust the gear, learn how to trust the gear. Like, I could free climb a tree, but you put a rope and a harness on me, and all of a sudden you forgot how to climb a tree because the equipment was so new to you.
Yeah.
And stuff. So there was so many learning things. And my first day on the tree job, like actually working for him, he's like, you want to try? So he had come down at lunch. We were doing a big removal, and he kind of like came down in an open space. And so he put me in his harness and in the rope, and it was a Blake's hitch. I don't think I had a pulley with it, so it was just like a hip thrusting Blake's hitch. I made it a total of 3 feet, thinking I was a super athletic, strong kid. I think I was 21.
That's cool.
3 feet. That's all the further I got off the ground. So it's fun going back and working with new guys, especially now that I'm really experienced and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't know how you do it. Like, I can't move like that. I'm like, I couldn't either, dude. I made it 3 feet. You're already the first limb. You've made it further than I did my first time climbing.
Exactly.
And I got specifically remember this one tree it was when I was really new to climbing. It wasn't my first climb, but slightly sloping lead. And my boss had given me a tie-in point, and I'm trying to body throw up and I spin off. And then he's like trying to give me tips. Okay, put your lanyard, use your feet. I got up 2 feet, spun off. And it must have took me 20 minutes to get up this lead.
Sure.
Like crazy. I look at that tree now, it's like a 40-foot tall maple. And I'm like, it took me 20 minutes to get up that lead. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
It's crazy.
Like, wow. That thing, I could walk up that thing in 30 seconds without even thinking anymore. Like, I could probably feel my way up.
Yep. Close your eyes.
It's crazy. And so I like having those experiences myself when I'm working with new climbers, and they're like getting frustrated. Yeah. And working with Mason, he's like, how do I get over that lead? I'm like, you jump. It's 3 feet, man.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
A 3-foot jump anywhere. I was like, think about jumping across the sidewalk. Would you even think twice? no, but I'm 80 feet up.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so that's what you have to overcome.
Yeah, no, that's
I was
great,
like, you know
dude.
what got me feeling comfortable at 80 feet is being in a crabapple or a magnolia at 20 feet off the ground when I had no problem tying into 2.5 inches or walking 10 feet out a limb because I'm 20 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
It's like, it's no different. Once you realize that you do it in a crabapple or a magnolia or on the ground, doing it in the tree, your mindset will eventually get over that height.
Yeah.
And that's where the fear of heights. I mean, I remember like a hemlock removal when I first started, and Brian was a great person to learn from because he would push you. He was a little bit more of the whole hard-nosed, no, you got to learn on your own from your own mistakes. I'm not going to correct you unless I feel like you're going to get really hurt, sort of deal. And I get up this hemlock removal. I'm on spikes. I get up and I'm like, can't go any higher. We're going to have to take the top here. He's like, you're only like halfway up, bro. I'm like, yeah. But it's like, I can't, like, spikes, I don't know if I can get them in anymore. Like, it's getting too small. He's like, how big is it? I'm like, about the size of my thigh. He's like, keep going.
Yeah.
So I go like, another 10 feet. And I'm like, done. Take the top here. He's like, how big? I'm like, it's like my forearm, my bicep. And he's like, nothing. Keep going. And then I was like, it's like my forearm. I'm like, keep going.
You're getting there.
And I'm not like each time. I'm like the first time I'm already progressed 10 feet. Now I'm only progressed 5 feet. Now 3 feet. And eventually I'm like, dude, it's almost the size. He's like, okay, the size of your wrist. Now you can take the top.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome.
I was terrified.
Of course.
And he's like, I remember one thing he said. He's like, it's almost as much as scary looking up as looking down. He's like, so just look ahead.
Wow. Yeah, because
that sounds weird, but you look up and the clouds are really moving fast, and now you're realizing how much the tree's blowing in the wind.
Oh yeah,
can be more terrifying than looking down and realizing how high you are.
True. Yeah.
Knowing you're in open space, moving in the wind is. Yeah. Mesa did good dealing with the wind yesterday because there was a lot. Good bit of wind.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Windsurfing, man. It takes a bit to get used to in a tree.
Oh, yeah.
I tell guys sometimes when I'm training them and they're having that same sort of, they hit that ceiling. I'm like, typically you can put your feet where your hands are now.
Yeah.
So you're
matching,
here.
Hands to feet.
Just put your feet where your hands are and go one more step. One more. Now, deal with limb angles and things, it's different, but, and that helps out a little bit.
Yeah, then dealing with age, that's different, too. I can't get my feet where my hands are anymore. You got to, lift the knee to get your foot that high.
Yeah. Can't stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that was actually a question I had, was like, where you are now. And it's, it's kind of become a little bit of a standard question. I'm always interested to see how guys navigate that. So, even because I even go back to your age, I'm like, my 60-year-old body's way different than even 45.
Oh yeah.
So my question is like, for you, like, what are a couple of the biggest differences that you notice from being 40 versus being 30, or recovery. 35 even?
Recovery, I think, is the thing I see the biggest difference in. Is that it used to be like little nagging injuries went away so quick when you were younger. I don't even have a perfect example for it, but recently,
you have a tweak in your shoulder.
Yeah. So I went through shoulder injuries, and I could come back in a week, or it wasn't even that much, but you could work through it so quick. Now, I had those back spasms, and it put me out for a solid 2 weeks, basically, and I tried to push myself to go back, but your body just does not recover. And so I haven't done a great job of maintaining, working out and stretching. There was a period of time I did really good with that. And then, life things happens, whatever it is, you get out of some of those habits. And when I stop and think back, I have gotten out of those habits of stretching regularly or just doing body weight workouts, because that's mostly what I did.
Yeah.
I had a pull-up bar every time I walked through the doorway. I had to do a couple pull-ups sort of deal. Sure. Stuff like that. And I just got out of those habits. And that's where I relate this, my most recent injury back to, quite literally, is that I'm older. I have to concentrate now on maintaining my body because I don't recover, and I'm going to have injuries that I didn't have in the past. if I don't start taking care. And Mark made a post recently, or on his Instagram recently, I saw someone asked about his workout thing, and he's like, I used to work out to get stronger and bigger or faster. He's like, now I'm working out mostly to maintain.
Yeah.
And that struck me coming from Mark, who's a very competitive, very athletic, physical guy who's still like playing ice hockey all the time. Still could show up to a competition and throw down with the best of them. 100%. I'm sure of it, even though he's like 92. Is that how old he is?
Just turned 92.
Push it.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, that struck with me, and that's what I'm noticing as I get older is I have to put energy in to staying where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Where it used to just be like natural.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
It's important.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, definitely. The body maintenance is a big thing, and it's funny because every little back injury I have now is if I tweak it, I'm 2 weeks out. And I've also noticed like certain things I just won't do anymore. Like I see guys jumping out of the back of the truck and different things, and I'm just like, I slide my butt off the deck now. I'm just like, I just don't want to.
I actually
have a misstep,
thought about that, and I still specifically jump out of the truck to feel young.
Yeah, no, I get it. Listen, I get it. Just there's a little instabilities, and I'm working through stuff with. It's a whole nother topic, but one of the guys recently, I just saw a podcast on his whole Lyme disease journey, and so some of the things I'm dealing with, but it's like it creates little tensions and weird things in your body, so I'm just having to pay attention. But I'm still working out to maintain. Like I've got to do my mobility. I've got to do some body weight stuff. Just even squatting.
Yeah.
Like just body weight squats.
Yeah.
Can I open those hips up?
Resistant band.
Yeah.
To help.
Yeah.
And then
bands
do a
great.
squat side to side movement.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually. I like to do workouts that are relatable. So when I do that, I'm thinking about how do I go out a limb? You go out in this like shuffle sort of thing. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, cool. If I put a resistant band on, I'm kind of practicing my walk sort of thing.
Yeah, make it fun.
Yeah.
No, I would just add for the listeners, again, this is what I found. I'm getting older as well, so I have the same thing where if something happens, the recovery process is longer. That's a known, that's a given, right? So children maintaining, and that's fine. But then the first question is, how do you maintain? What does that mean? What does it look like? And I just feel like instead of looking at it as you're doing exercises, mobility, like there's a thing that you have to do, you just need to return to movement. The reason why I'm like really big on that, or trying to be big on it, is what is movement? And people are like, and I'm like, no. I want you to look at it like a baby. How do babies learn how to crawl? How do they learn how to stand? And so you work off the floor. And working off the floor, like I promise you, try this. You, especially the way what you're dealing, but try it. When you go home tonight or tomorrow morning, you're gonna get out of bed. The first thing you do is lay on the floor and tell me you don't feel a sense of like,
So that's an interesting thing. Someone told me to look at a cat. A cat always stretches the first thing it does when it gets. Oh, you see that? And I had been in that habit, and with this back injury, I got into it again because before I even got out of bed, I would do a stretch almost like, okay, let's feel everything out. Let's get a back stretch in, like stretch it out on the bed because it took a little bit to get out of bed.
I did, but do it on the floor. I don't know what. I don't know why. There's something. Maybe your brain knows it's something. Just I promise you, get on the floor, do your stretch, roll around it, and be like a baby. Just do baby things, and that's it. Get up and go do whatever you want to do. Then the next day you're gonna be like, I want to do that again. And then you try this, then you move this way, and then you start so it's like essentially like that. This is good. I like this is a good connection before that because I see it. That is, remember I said before about how your brain makes a record.
Yes.
The default programming. What's the default programming for us? When we were born.
Right.
Infancy.
Literally. So I'm working on this myself, but as we get older and recovery is harder, if we focus on that first to be the base before mobility, exercise, and everything else, I really do think the benefit is in that. And that's what I wanted to
crazy thing, because the guys that I work with that, like, they're trainers, but they're like high level, whatever. They program everything. I remember when I first met them 12 years or plus ago, back injury, they had me literally crawling.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, and he was like, almost like an infancy reset. We're taking you back to foundational movements. Okay. And then they had me like put my feet on the floor, and do breathing for like pelvic floor stability. And then I would do get-ups.
Get up,
and then they would add a like a kettlebell. Okay, do a get up, but you're gonna hold the bell, like all this sort of. And then I progressed to like just a bear crawl with my knees down, bear crawl with my knees up. Like took me from rudimentary, fundamental crawling, and just rebuilt back up to.
And meanwhile, the whole time, and I know this, the whole time your body's like, this is stupid. I got to go to work.
Well, in my mind, I was 100%. I'm like, but the thing is, knowing the why really helped. I was like, what are we doing? And he basically said what you just said. He's like, think about it. And the baby, when you learn. And then that other guy, Perry Nicholson, he's big on like lymph massage, things you can do to yourself to kind of like detox your body. Mm-hmm. But he's big on literally getting off the floor from all different positions. And you should do, 3 to 5 reps of every possible way, lay down and get up. Yeah. Use your hands. Don't use your hands. Fold your legs Indian style. Stand up. And basically what he says is like, as you age, like in the next 20 years, I'll be 80. Well, am I going to be able to get up out of a chair? Am I going to be able to like lay on the floor with the grandkids, get up off the floor? Like these are things we take for granted now, but a lot of people as they age, like you get into senior and beyond, what does that look like? I mean, my old boss I ran into at work day, 78. The man still does tree work.
That's awesome.
And he's one of these guys nobody knows. Stan Wrigley's his name. I'll give him a shout out. Stan Wrigley. He's not like running some like highfalutin, company. He's still a little bit in the dark ages, but he's a very smart operator. He taught me a lot about rigging, directional felling, but he's a healthy guy. He's just been that healthy. He's not a partier, never drank a lot of beer, like just eats decent food.
You sure he's a tree guy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know. Crazy. But like all the way, he was early on, he was a mentor because I didn't have a clean sort of like organized lifestyle, and he was just that like kind of a masculine, solid figure in my life. Nice. But it was cool to see him. Mason ran into him. He's like, he met him before. He's like, I'm your dad's tree dad kind of thing,
That's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, those rudimentary movements are vital. I think it's something we don't really think about, but it can bring healing.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
So what started that for you? Like to go back to those rudiments? Like was it just something you explored or?
Okay, so I'll try to keep it short. So when I dropped out of college, obviously, my mom's side of the family was like, listen, no, this is not what we do. You can't do this. And it was a big thing. And I was in a bad mental, physical, spiritual state at that time. So I knew where I was going is really bad. This sounds bad, but it's not bad compared to where I'm going. So I'm dropping out of school. And then you sit in your room at home and you go, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, I'm a failure. I'm a loser. My family, it's a bad situation. And I've always been, I told you before, I was always doing the tree climbing anyway. So, parkour style, crazy stuff, whatever. That's a whole nother story. But that was the root of being like, okay, as I move forward, what do I know? What do I know is going to work? And that was, as long as I work with my body, I'll be fine. So I went to Barnes & Noble, 3 books of Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do, and I became a disciple. And a lot of one book was philosophy, the other one was the martial art, and the other one was the bodybuilder. So it was a nice mix of all 3.
Yeah.
And I dove. I mean, when I say dove in, like my room became the colors of the nature. I hung up yin yang, tiger, Bruce Lee, and all that stuff. So it's always been a part of my journey, even when it comes to climbing, the biomechanics, how we're moving, how we're doing stuff. And with that, what we're talking about, as the age became a part of it, the biological issues. That became like, okay, I noticed this change. I don't like it. And what I've been using or doing isn't quite tapping into that. So what is it? And then Ido Portal. I don't know if you guys know the name.
Nope.
Well, listeners, Ido, which is spelled I-D-O, and it's spelled portal, but I think it says Portal. Ido Portal. This guy, he took this concept and brought it to the upteenth level, but he's also a black belt in multiple martial arts styles from capoeira, Eastern martial arts, everything. And he also was like, there's something missing, like, and then you'll see this whole thing. This floor is like off the floor movement, and then the way they can move their body it's like animated clay motion stuff. It's like, dude, there's no way I can move like that, but it comes from the floor. But if you think about it, and this is where I love to get philosophical. If you think about it, what is the floor?
Ground.
Yeah, earth, right? Everything like grows from you. Everything like, so it's like you don't want to think about the house. That's not the floor. The thing is, we're on a planet. We're on Earth. Like everything. So like the idea of having shoes on is not good for you because you're not connected to the Earth. Like there's so much in that. So it's the same concept. It's like it's there. You'll get, as you rise from the Earth, you start to learn things. You start to figure things out, which includes your body as well. So I've heard little bits here and there, and I saw Ido Portal, and that was the beginning of being like, okay, but as the age thing is starting to come into play, the more I'm like, I'm not exercising, I'm not trying to build, as you know, you and Mark are saying, trying to maintain, but I'm also trying to rediscover, like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
What I have going on feels good. Lifting weights, I love it. I love doing all that stuff, but it's not quite giving me what I need. You know what I mean?
Good for you. You love it, man.
I
hate lifting weights.
Obsessed, bro. Like obsessed. Yeah.
Wow.
I think I've been in a gym like twice.
But
it is like my least place I want to be.
But it's so, you know what? It's interesting that you say that because the physicality that you have, like you want to be involved, competitive physicality and stuff. So and that's why, like, I'm trying to like drive home the point for you and listeners that if you approach it differently with a different mindset, like just doing curls, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But doing a clean and press is like picking up a piece of wood and putting it on the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Right.
To your point, like you have this visual.
I've always got a kick out of, like, when I worked at Goods, we had a couple of people that were physical trainers that would come and work with us. Dude, they'd last a day to 2 days. I mean, I don't think I've seen a physical trainer come in and last a week.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you drag things like at the gym. Like, you're going to leave here, go to the gym, and do exactly what you're doing here, but inside with machines or weights.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just get into doing it here?
Yeah, get it do it here. But I would even dare say that's very, very linear, the gym.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
That's where but the building, you want to, so in order to maintain something, and it's, again, if you're trying to maintain something, you need to have something to maintain.
Right.
So you got to build something to maintain it.
That's
right?
a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where the bodybuilding comes in. Kids need structure, so they learn best in structure. Your body needs a structure as well, so it needs to have that. You know what you say, like tearing apart, rebuilding, and that stuff. But then the maintaining of that is the key point as well. You know, like that would be, you know, telling somebody just work out, but you don't need to eat food. Like, no, your body needs food in order to rejuvenate the cells and keep moving and do the things that it needs to do. So, but yeah, when it's not the gym necessarily, but it's the idea of like picking up a log to put it on a truck. Yeah. It's the same thing as picking up a barbell that's 90 pounds and moving it in its almost same fashion.
Yeah.
So. It's interesting what helped me, because I was a gym kid back in the day where it was just like, you know, bench press, dips, blah, 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 like your standard sort of to build muscle and strength. I didn't love it. I did it because I knew it was good for me, and I benefited from the psychological benefits being that ADHD kid or whatever. Yeah. When I really hit my stride was when I found CrossFit later in life, and I almost broke it down like with the tree work. Like you talked about Olympic lifting. Like the idea of like setting up on a lift and like knowing like I move my body like this and, you know, elbows up, drop under the bar. Like the interfaces, the little nuances, the technique, how the knurled bar felt in my hands, like, and then stringing the different activities together so it satisfied that sort of like, I wasn't stuck in, because, you know, in the CrossFit community, you're combining sometimes like a running element with a lifting element with a, and it's set for time or rounds, or so there's a goal. And that just really, for me, that resonated. Yeah. And it allowed me to not be bored with the movements. And so it really engaged the mind and the body, which really worked for me. And now starting to get into some of what you're talking about, like just having to change things, like finding ranges of motion with joints and being coached, something simple like just doing a neck roll, or like warming up you're warming up your neck. Like my guy's like, move your neck. And he's like, find like where it either hurts or you find tension. Don't push it. And do that kind of the whole way around and just feel like where that is. And then try to just gently expand that circle. Do maybe 5 one way and 5 the other. Then do that with your shoulders. Then do that with your hips. Then do it with your ankles. And this can be like a pre-climb routine that takes you literally 2 minutes. But it gets all that fluid moving, gets the heart rate up, gets your mind working. Like, so I could see what you're saying, like even the crawling stuff, or like being on the ground. Do some get up off the ground a few times. Like there's a lot of things we can do that I think will just prepare the body for the more complex and dynamic movements of moving into the tree.
Yeah, I like to. I think you appreciate this. I like to look at it as that you're coming or getting to or coming into more consciousness, and that's the best state to be in to take the test every day.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? If you're not you're just like, another day, I'll just climb this tree, do this thing, and then you're not. But like doing that, whatever routine you have, like me, one of the things I love jump roping. That's just.
That's awesome.
Right? Yeah. It does enough to get me to be. I have to be conscious of it, so that when I get in the tree, I'm kind of conscious from the beginning. So I'm always trying to take the test. So.
I got a question. What does the cube do for you?
The Rubik's Cube?
Yes, I love it. Thank
you. I really like the mental aspect of problem solving. So it's a puzzle.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I almost brought it up earlier because one thing that I've found, like, I like correlating to things. And like one thing I've learned from the cube is the Rubik's Cube, part of it is intuitive and then part of it's algorithms. So the more algorithms you learn, the quicker you can recognize and solve things. But basically, like I'd say I have close to 100 algorithms memorized on the Rubik's Cube at the moment, which is a lot. But those are all different ways to solve it. And I relate that to tree work. Like we have all these tools and different ways of accomplishing something. And you're instantaneously taking it and applying this method. And that's what I do with the Rubik's Cube. And I like it because it's a mental thing, a puzzle solving, but it's also a reaction thing. And so I time myself every time pretty much. And because it's fun for me to challenge myself against myself. How fast am I reacting? How fast am I recognizing a situation and then solving it? Because that's how you get fast at that, at the Rubik's Cube, is how quick your reaction to recognizing and then doing the algorithm to solve it. And we have the same thing, not just in tree work, but I've related this to so many things. Like for my son who wasn't, like social things didn't come as quickly to him, I started relating it because he's the one who got me into the Rubik's Cube. So I was like, okay, you have these algorithms he was into chess too. So it's like, you have these ways of setting things up through movements. Like you can do the same thing socially, or same thing in tree work, is you have what's worked for you in this scenario before, and you take it and process that. And we're going to use that again in a similar scenario, or we approach these and that. And like, you can do this throughout life if you have ways of approaching different scenarios with already a situation that you've come across in the past. Really so cool. In tree work, like we have our tools. I break it down to how I'm going out a limb. We have a number of different ways we can set that up and go out it. But it's like, how are you attacking it in this situation? And when I was practicing so much, but didn't realize I was practicing for the comps, those were the things I was instilling, is that muscle memory of movements in trees. And in this scenario, I'm going to go out a limb this way. In this one, I'm going to go out this way. When I was first trying to learn SRT and become as smooth as I was in moving rope, that's basically what it was, is I was finding, okay, in this position, this is the easiest way to get out of the limb, or I want to be on this side of the limb. If I got to do this movement, get out to there, I got to set up this redirect. So I had all these consistent things that I was using. And it was like, how fast can I recognize that scenario and use a method that I already know to accomplish that goal? And the more you know and the quicker you can recognize it, the faster you can get that thing done. So you asked about the Rubik's Cube. The more I learn and the quicker you learn to recognize the situation and install that, the faster I become. And those are the little things. And then I'm just I'm competitive. So I'm not self-motivated necessarily, but when I can see a quick result like that, that's where the Rubik's Cube grabs my attention so much, because it's such a fast thing to compete against yourself and constantly be competing. And I do find it as a real big mental, for me now, like it used to be like something you really focused on. Now I do it almost subconsciously. So when I'm in a situation where it keeps me busy, keeps my mind engaged, and that's what I really enjoy about doing it now. And people are like, why do you do it so much? Or like, what's the goal? I've never competed. I've thought about it. Those kids, I mean, they're done in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, those neural pathways.
I'm never going to do that, but
no, it's cool.
It is fun.
I asked because I've seen you. I've seen you do it, and I knew that there. And you got the perfect answer, because it's a thing in and of itself. But then there's correlations and parallels and ways that it works, and you're working the physiological nature of firing neural pathways in brain and problem solving, and you're shortening those timelines, and then that's going to make you quicker in other applications. And I really got the answer I sort of thought, and it's cool to hear it.
Not only is it cool to hear it, speaking of kind of as we were talking, like you are keeping your mental state sharp. And that's another thing when it comes to age.
That's one thing I really enjoy.
Right?
I used to do a lot of Sudoku, but then that wore off, and I'm sure the Rubik's Cube will wear off eventually too, where you got to constantly find something to keep you re-engaged. And that's what we're doing with tree work. Like doing 20 years, you got to find another way to keep it engaging to you, keep it exciting. And that's what it is. It's interesting for me also with the Rubik's Cube, because I'm the fastest when I'm not trying hard. I do it while I'm having conversations, like at lunch, at work, I do it. And I'm still talking to the guys. I'm still having full conversations. That's where I'm fastest. And that's really intriguing to me. So I really geek out on this with the Rubik's Cube.
Let's go, please.
Because I keep, I time myself, but I keep track of my times at home. I keep track of times at work. I keep track of times when I'm out having a drink or a bite to eat. So I have different ones, and I record each one. And it's really interesting to me. My fastest times are at work at lunch, where I'm fully engaged. I'm using my body. I'm using my mind. At work, it's very mentally stimulating, very physically stimulating. And that's really encouraging to me that my fastest times are coming at work. That's when I'm at my best. At work.
Yeah, I got you.
Fully engaged.
I wonder.
That's really interesting. It also is interesting with one drink how fast that time drops and you're not reactive. And like you hear that, like, oh, you should drive after one drink, and it's like, not much has changed until you really break it down and you really know how much it is changing your reaction time or something like that. Like, it's crazy to see the differences in
scenarios,
and outcomes, and it really made me think about certain things, like having a drink or something like that. It was like, well, no, I'm not at my best, not even after one drink. So if I want to put myself in a scenario, say a social situation where I have a meeting with, since I work with Notch or something like that, well, I'm not going to go into that with a drink in me if I want a clear result or something, because it affects you that fast.
What was I just going to say? Oh, it kind of reminds me, and I wonder, like, when they talk about learning styles, right? Some people are visual, some people are audio, some people are combination, some people are kinetic. And so I realize, like, my learning style is visual tactile, meaning like I see things done. And I think a lot of us in this industry are,
it's a common
but there's
thing.
also an element of kinetic. So what I hear when you say that is, you're on a job, your body's been moving. When you're doing the cube at lunch, are you typically sitting or kind of standing, leaning against? Okay. Because I'm just wondering if, like, the movement, a lot of times, like, I'll learn best maybe I'm kind of tapping, my body's in motion, or I'm like, you'll see me sometimes sway, or I practice these like Tai Chi or Qigong things. You don't realize it because it just looks like I'm swaying, but I'm doing these like opening
those
things.
Those little movements.
Like shoulders, the joint, like kind of like I'm opening up joints and things, but I'm doing it so I'm getting tens of thousands of reps in while I'm standing. Yeah. But what I'm wondering is if like that's part of it.
Well,
the kinetic nature of what you're doing.
I think it is, though. I think just because he stopped doesn't mean that the benefit of you, whatever you did up until lunchtime, it hasn't played into
1000%.
Like that's not. I mean, that's not what I believe. Like so that dance of your body and your mind doing the tree work, whatever it was, and when you go to sit down, everything's firing that crisp.
He's in a heightened state.
It was like, I am engaged, super engaged, mentally, physically, and it's interesting to see, to be able to see that result in a whole different way.
Yeah, like you did a study.
Yeah, essentially,
which is cool.
I like
a clinical study.
I really like the gathering of information and applying it in different ways, and I think that's one of the things. Like when we first started talking about this, is like the little details of your climbing systems and stuff like that. Like, and that's what I see with it is like I've always enjoyed that. Gathering information and seeing how to apply it, in little changes, in little differences, because sometimes those make the big differences.
No doubt. Micro adjustments.
Yeah, and the Rubik's Cube has changed my mindset going into competitions as well, of how I'm applying things. Like when I'm fastest with the Rubik's Cube, it's not that I'm able to do the algorithms faster, it's actually looking ahead. So when I look at like the work climb, which is like the big event, and I went to the international and watched this year without competing, what I noticed the differences in the guys from the top of the scale to more mid-level or whatever is like Barton Allen Hall's at the top of the game right now, and like James Earhart, these guys that are at like that highest level, the details that they're breaking it down to is not what they're doing now, but what they're doing next. And like the greatest chess players are 10 moves ahead. When I'm fastest with the Rubik's Cube, I'm seeing not this move, I'm seeing the next move or two moves later. And that's when you're at your best. And the top tree climbers, I forgot how it was like, I don't just see the bell, I see what side I should be on approaching that limb. And I was watching them break it down to steps. Like to watch Barton approach the first bell, he's going boom, 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 boom. You could see him practice the steps on the ground, and he's breaking it down to such a detail and knows what the next thing is. And so when I went home and it was like, I need to practice with more intention behind it. Those were the things I was starting to say. I was like, okay, I don't want to just hit that limb. I want to hit that limb with my left foot so that I can push off to my right foot. And now I'm on the backside facing the system. But now not just to that bell, what's the first move from that bell to set up the next bell? And I remember when I was at the height of competing, when I had my really good 2 years at the international and when I won Charlotte, I was breaking it down to those details too. And I kind of lost that focus. And it's been fun to have something that kind of refocuses me or shows me those detail things again. Yeah. It's not just, how do I get to that bell? It's like, what are the best steps? What side of the limb should I be on? Yeah. And like to set up swings, like with Mason yesterday, I told him, hey, look, you're tied in here. That could get you there. Tie in 3 foot higher. And this was something that Jim Roach was the one that really made me aware of it. We helped set up a masters together, and I tied in here and he tied in here. 3 feet difference. When we practiced it, like to make sure it was all doable, I couldn't make the one swing. And he said, here, try my system. 3 feet higher, made the swing on the first try. Wow. Those little details of how you set up a swing, or like, okay, yes, this is my tie-in point, but if I put a redirect 3 feet out from it, doesn't seem like much, but gives me a little bit of momentum to make that swing or set that thing up. It's sometimes those details are really what changes things. And it's fun. It was a lot of fun for me at this year's international, just as a spectator, to start breaking those down and seeing the differences in the level of climbers and where their attention is. And it is to the next step, not this step. It's how much further ahead can they see.
And it's funny because I did compete in international, and I can tell you right now, I was 100% only focused on what now. Like I wasn't, right. I didn't.
And so I got to run the work climb and the masters.
Yeah.
And that's where I realized how far out of the game I am, because I was the exact same way. I was like, okay, there. And when I was up at the top, I was like trying to get into it from a competitive standpoint. I was like, okay, here. Okay, I can make a big jump going towards that one. Was the pole saw?
Yep.
Yeah. I was like, you can make a big jump. But then as I'm watching guys, it wasn't the big jump that made it fastest. It was coming 2 steps down, hitting it, and staying smooth and continuous motion. Mm-hmm. But not only that, like if you want to break that one down, it just happened. It was like if you hit it and stayed on the upper limb, your rope got caught. If you made one extra step to the lower limb, even though it put you at a different, it changed the angle and your rope came across the brush and you didn't have to clear it.
No, you're right.
And those were the little tiny details that, like, again, when I ran the work climb, didn't see it all, but then sat back and watched some guys do it. It was like, oh yeah. Now I'm starting to remember.
But to your point, you know, they're not in. They're in the moment. I was in the moment, focused on what's happening now, but they're in the moment, but also seeing the next two steps or whatever.
The next station. They're not thinking about the station they're on.
Yeah, which is.
Again, going back with the Rubik's Cube, when I'm the fastest, I'm not even thinking about it, I'm just reacting. I think it's the same thing. They're thinking about the next station, just reacting to this one, but they've already worked out how they're going to approach it. They already know it, so they can move ahead to the next one. Wow. And I remember what I would say was my best work climb ever. I can say 2 of them. One was in Charlotte, one was the International in San Antonio. But the one specifically in Charlotte, I remember planning out the entire climb from the top, like to the bottom station. Like it wasn't, I didn't have to think about what I'm doing at this one because I already knew what I was doing at this one. I could see beyond it. And the reason I say the one in Charlotte was my best work climb ever is because I actually nailed exactly what I saw. Typically, you have a plan and you're trying it, but you have to navigate with changes or like a misstep or, you know, I think if I step to the lower limb, it'll clear that brush. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But the one in Charlotte that I remember specifically, I did I planned the whole thing from the top and nailed it as I planned it, and it was like, you know, really good.
Right?
The San Antonio work climb wasn't quite the same way because I made a huge adjustment in the middle of that one, which changed the whole climb for me. Right. But you know, that was something where I didn't see it, and then Jared Abergina came to me and was like, Derrick, if you're running SRT, there's something you might see, you should try it. And I don't think if T said, I would have seen it, but I don't think I would have ever tried it if T wanted to put that thought in my head. Because Tony Trussell was at the top of the tree with me, and I'm about to, I'm getting warmed up. There was a little break with the judges for whatever reason, and I was like, Tony, can you take a redirect in the work climb? I've never seen anybody do it. But that's what Jared pointed out to me. He's like, there's a chance for a redirect in this tree that you don't have to come back in from. And I was like, okay. And I saw it instantly. As soon as I got to the tree, I was like, oh, that's what he's talking about. I was like, I asked Tony, I was like, can you do a redirect? He's like, you can't leave gear in the tree. He's like, but if you can pull the rope out from the ground, like you can't pre-stage anything or anything. I was like, yeah, okay, So that's what changed that whole climb for me. And I think I was 30 seconds faster than the second place guy or something like that. But it was because of changing the whole thing in that
I got
moment.
A cool thing I want to jump in because I think it's
because I went way off.
So. But listen, it totally relates to what you're saying and I'll bring it in because you snowboard, right? Or
I ski.
Okay,
I ski.
You ski. So I've been
snowboarders holding me back.
Yeah. So and I agree. So here's so funny story. I've been skiing and people ask me like I'm not trying to go off on a big Paul Beaster thing, but like it's the single thing I do best.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying
like I've been skiing my whole life. I raced competitively, but
you did mogul stuff too.
But my favorite thing is moguls, right?
Yeah.
And what it reminds me of is
that's so hard.
I hit a big mogul field. Like there's a trail. It's East Coast, but it's called Outer Limits. It's at Killington, and it's steep.
Oh yeah.
And there's moguls the size of Volkswagens there. And so what you do is, and this is what I'm hearing. See, if I know you'll hear the correlation. What's wild is you're skiing 30, 40 feet in front of yourself.
Yeah, you see that line.
You see that
through the
line.
Woods, through the
you're
moguls.
set up, whether you're doing gladed skiing. There's a trail there called Big Dipper, which is moguls through the trees, which is absolutely like my favorite.
I know which one you're talking about.
You don't focus on the trees, man. You focus on that line. You focus on the trees, you're going to hit a tree.
Yeah.
The point is,
where's your focus?
When your moves ahead, you're in the tree and you're visualizing it. The body is almost reacting. You're not thinking. It's almost like this split. Your brain is able to go, there's my line. Your body's moving in time and space, and your brain is processing out here. Your body's behind your brain.
Reacting.
Your body's reacting. You're not thinking, and that is the zone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When you
That
hit
is
that
flow
zone, you know
state, bro.
you're in it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you,
It's exactly.
I don't have
right.
the glory of I competed. Okay, fine. I can relate it to like production work where I'm moves ahead and I'm rigging and I'm like, I see the tree in my head and it's done. And yeah, that works. But when I bring it into like the ski world or some physical activity that somebody does where it's like repetitive and your body's it's just cool that the mind can be ahead of the body, and the body, it's the path's already drawn out, and the body's just going, all right, yep, I see what you did there, and the mind's going, okay, come on, we're up here.
So
love it.
Where I felt like I lost
dude.
that in the competition set, I have it so much at work now.
Yeah.
I do a lot of removals as a contract climber.
Yep.
When I walk up to a removal, I can almost have that whole tree planned out per cut within a minute to 2 minutes of walking up to that tree.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work out exactly as the plan. We always have to be open to changing the plan because you get in the tree and sometimes things are bigger, sometimes things are smaller.
Angles
whatever.
are different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it is wild to me that, you can do that. Like you can literally walk up to a tree and see everything down to the last cut almost instantaneously when we've done it enough and really focused enough. And yeah, I'm saying where I need to refocus for the competition things and be a lot more specific in my training for that because I got to get that muscle memory back. But at work, that muscle memory is very much
right
there.
there.
And it becomes a downside too, as we were talking about aging physically and the muscle memory and how do we stay in tune. For me, at least I feel like because I have so much muscle memory to exactly what I'm doing and I've already known what I'm going to do at production, I'm not using anything outside of that. When we were first learning and you're putting a lot of extra effort into it and stuff, there was a lot more of a workout going involved.
Doubt.
There was a lot more activity. When we have it down to just that muscle memory and we have, let's say, 5 algorithms that I can apply to this whole removal and get the whole removal done like that, instead of you doing it in 20 different, different ways. And it's interesting to see how that muscle memory can actually work against you sometimes too, is where I feel like that's one of the reasons I had this back injury is because I wasn't exercising in different ways. And it was such a muscle memory that as soon as I did work outside of that muscle memory, all of a sudden my body wasn't used to that stress
That's an
anymore.
incredibly good point. And I 100% know what you're saying because I can be having a terrible day
have to
physically.
practice disciplines outside
No
of
doubt.
what you do every day to keep yourself engaged for when you do need it.
Yeah.
No, you got,
like,
you got,
I was just going to say, I can be having a horrible day physically and just go, all right, all I got to do is get this tree done. And my body just goes in.
Done.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like I 1,000% agree. Someone will say, how is it climbing? I'm like, well, my entries are slower. Like I'm not going to be you getting up in a tree, but in my mental game is better than ever. I have more algorithms. I have more, you know what I mean?
I'll apply it quicker.
So I go, same thing. I walk up, assess, boom, 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 the plan, work the plan, visualize, keep those steps. I keep adjusting the algorithm if needed, but I've got a base to bounce off of. But yeah, you're right. It's a fascinating point.
Where I don't feel like a better climber these days, I'm definitely more productive because I'm seeing 3 steps ahead.
The efficiency.
And the difference between like when I work with these crews and they're like, wow, like, dude, another contractor that would have taken him to like that big project where you laugh about what I said. I was like, this is a big big job.
Oh yeah, you're like,
that was a 2-day job, and we finished it in a day and a half.
Oh yeah, it was great.
We crushed it.
Oh yeah,
but that wasn't because I'm a better climber. It's because we already know the next step, and you
setup.
can already move to it. Like the differences I see in my productivity versus when I was younger and a better climber is that I get the rope back and I'm already moving to the next one, to the next cut, so that the rope's tied off and I'm in position to make the cut as soon as the ground was cleared. So it's not me, as soon as the ground's cleared, going, setting the rope and getting ready to make the cut or that notch. It's like it's already done.
Dude, the mind is ahead of the body, dude. All the body's doing is connecting the dots. You're because I had an experience. In fact, I just worked with one of my old foremen at Workday. He's the head arborist for the county now.
Okay, cool.
And I remember him coming. He came from Bartlett and all. We climbed together a lot. And I was 15 years younger, something like that. But I remember him. He came out of the tree and he was like shaking his head. The one day he's like, I don't understand it. And I'm like, what? And he was like jammed up about like younger and experience. And he's a talented guy. He's like, I don't understand. He's like, every time we're doing it, he's like, I'm looking at you and I'm like, you don't look like you're moving fast. You don't look like you're hurrying. You don't. And it's like, and all of a sudden, like you're pulling your line out of the tree and I got 3 more things. And it's this thing I always preach, which is the gap management thing. It's the gaps in between the moves.
Oh yeah,
it's not the
that's
speed
where the boy
with which you're moving.
That's where everything's lost.
It's those Rubik cube moves.
Yeah,
it's
you don't have to pause to know what to do next.
Yeah, you're just applying what's known to an unknown factor, and you're
I remember
connecting the dots, which is cool.
Tony Trussell, when I worked at Arborist Enterprises, and I think this is like 15, 16 years ago, he was somebody that I was a younger climber, and he's like, you got to start moving to the next piece and stop thinking about it so much. And like, in the moment, I was like kind of upset that he said that. And I'm like, I'm planning out my route. Like this is making me more efficient, taking that time and understanding how to do it right. And I was right as well. But now seeing his experience, he already knew the next step, and he's like, "You need to see it too." Is essentially what he was telling me, and he was right, 100% right. But I had to go through my steps to get to that point too, because I wasn't at his experience level. No. But that, thinking back on it, like him saying that to me, and I remember my foreman, Mike, was like, "Derrick, like, he's right. Take it, but." You are thinking about what your next step is and planning out steps, and that's important too, because to get to that point of knowing what the next step is you first have to learn it.
No doubt.
you first have to think it through.
Right? Yeah, of course. It's it's anything really. How would you know?
Right. You don't know till you know.
Exactly.
Like
right.
Online, you get these safety arborists and armchair arborists that are pinging these guys that are working without a helmet or without chaps or spiking everything.
I know.
I'm like, dude, I'm so lucky in that I learned from a certified arborist that was really progressive in his climbing techniques, amazing at his rigging techniques and safety standards. Not that we were perfect, but I learned from that. So I learned these things right. Yeah. If I started with Joe Schmo down the street that still tops trees today,
you still don't.
That's what I would have known. Yeah. And I wouldn't have known anymore. So until you know, you don't know.
You don't know, exactly. That's just to add, I have to add it because it drives me nuts personally, but that's the thing I have a hard time with is when people do that. It's like, hey man, the guy or the girl is in the tree trying to do the work.
Right.
That's like half the battle.
Yeah.
If
you know what
don't
I mean?
criticize till you've educated.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Don't criticize till you've educated.
Exactly.
Because until you've taught them, they don't know.
They don't know. Yeah.
You can't be upset with them for not knowing.
No.
Different.
And then, and even to the point of like, if you do educate them, and they're like, I don't care, I want to do whatever I want. Like you're still willing to do the craft. You're just adding a higher risk to the situation, and I can't help you at that point. You know.
Yeah.
if they're willfully ignorant, right?
Yes.
It's one thing not to know. It's another thing to know and not do, or know and not care to do.
Now I don't mind coming down on somebody, but until they know, I got to remember where I started too. And that's why I liked that I struggled some in certain aspects when I started, and I just didn't take to it. Like I've taught guys and girls that have just took to it so naturally. It's like they didn't even struggle, and I was glad I had those struggles, because now I can relate with, at the crane school, and a guy who only has 2 years of experience is having a hard time. Well, how do I get out to set that strap? It's like, all right, cool. I was in these shoes before. Let's work through how to get over there. How can I make that 3-foot jump like Mason was struggling with? And like, sometimes it's hard for those guys who have been around for a long time, and I have to constantly remind myself, so I don't do this, that they don't know as much as you. So, I hear an old guy yelling, like, you gotta push, don't pull. Like, what are you, an idiot? Well, yeah, because they don't have the experience that you have. They had to do it wrong. You had to do it wrong at one point too to learn.
Multiple times.
Why'd you get the saw stuck? Don't you know you gotta cut from the bottom? I'm like, well, yeah, you do now, because you've done it wrong.
I just learned just now when I got it stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, that's a big thing in leadership. And I know like multiple leadership strategies and tactics or whatever. It's like, a lot of times as a leader, we communicate or we say a thing. We don't know someone owns it or not. Or we haven't really properly set the expectations. Like, don't they know X, Y, Z? It's like, well, did you personally show them? Did you personally teach them exactly how that? And it could be something as simple as tying a knot or making a snap cut.
Yeah, and then
it's like,
and then remember how many times you have to repeat it to memorize that.
Perfect.
Because it's just because I showed them to them once, or just because you told them once, doesn't mean it was retained from one time.
Right.
I don't retain things from one time. Maybe I grab one thing, but dude, what is it, like 36 times or so? What's the number that you have to repeat it before it's committed to memory? I think
I
it's something
forget.
like 26 or 30. Yeah, right. I didn't do it enough times. I want to say it's like 32 or 36 times that they say you have to repeat something before it's committed to memory. So it's like, and don't just tie the knot.
and in that, there's so many different things happening. It's not like I said, curling a barbell is a one linear motion.
Right.
We're talking about something that has so many valuable movements in there that's not even the same thing.
It's going to change.
Yeah, like a snap cut.
Yeah.
You do a snap cut, you do the other one, you see it would move just a little bit. And you guys know this. The new people never see the movement.
No,
like, you
never.
didn't see a movement. Like, I didn't see anything. I'm like, well, yeah, because you got the saw pinch. I know you didn't. But you didn't see anything.
I
like,
saw you getting it pinched 2 seconds ago.
Exactly.
That's funny.
So it is, So it's like
little nuance.
And that, so it's 36 for a simple, straightforward thing.
Right, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's probably triple that for the dynamics that we have and stuff. So it's cool. It's just a cool concept.
It is cool.
What do you got?
I don't know, man. What are we thinking? Are we?
What do you got? Anything? This is like it's something that you want to dive into.
I don't know if I have anything off the top of my head. I mean,
that's good,
I don't know. We were talking about things that inspire us and keep us moving, and that has to keep changing. I think. And one of the things that has been fun for me is testing new products and stuff like that. And that's been, you started this industry and you kind of have goals or dreams and whatever. And man, it's been fun to see some of those dreams come true or some of those goals be accomplished and stuff as we're getting longer into our careers and stuff. And I think that's one for me that has been something, it's kind of mind blowing to be able to test products now.
That's awesome.
Which is when I first started, and specifically on Tree Buzz, and man, who's the ones that gets to do that? That is cool.
It is cool.
That's really cool. But then there's the other side, is because things don't come out exactly as the feedback is, and you have to learn how to manage that too,
Yeah, I mean,
because there's
that's the
multiple
nature.
sides of it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
I'm not the
nature.
only one using it or going to use it or
Yeah.
helping with things. Yeah.
And you're also not the one who finalizes.
No, I don't have any.
That's
I don't
what I
see
mean.
any of the cost. I don't see any of how that stuff impacts things.
No,
I don't.
no,
I don't see it, and that's fun. It's become a new challenge, though, is how to manage that specifically online, and that gets harder and harder
no
because
doubt.
of how technology's changed. And like it started with Tree Buzz, that was really our only source.
Yep.
At least mine was.
Yeah.
And then it became Facebook, and now it's almost too many sources that I don't even know where to focus my energy.
Yeah.
Or how to manage it, because you can say anything without a lot of repercussions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or any.
Yeah, yeah.
I do have something that just popped into my mind. It's not trying to get to the end game or anything, but just, I'm sitting here across from you. You're 40 now, I'm 60 because, when I hit 50, it was a big shift in like, okay, wow, 50, that's a big number. 40 was like, okay, 40, I'm out of my 30s. I still felt relatively, okay, but 60 now, I could live in an over 50 community, I almost qualify for Social Security, for God's sake, right?
Love it.
But
Love it.
I'm citizen discount. No?
Yeah, so I'm starting to. We talk about thinking moves ahead in the tree business and climbing, but what about moves ahead in life?
Don't we have to be? Isn't that kind of what we're saying?
Well, and that's I guess what I'm asking is like we want to live in the now, we want to be present, we want to be, and all we really have in philosophical terms is the now, right? The future's not worth necessarily worrying about, but we should.
Guaranteed.
The past, it's the wake of the boat. It never really drives the boat. The wake never drives the boat, right? Have you considered how many years longer? Do you have an exit strategy? Like, where's your brain with that?
It's something that has come up a lot more.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, as you get older, it is always something. Becoming a contract climber, I think it's my 5th year as a contract climber.
Okay.
I love it. The physical toll it takes on your body to climb every day, the mental stress of doing big trees every day, or a problem solving for a company. A lot of times that's why they call in a contract climber. I've gotten in a steady flow, so it's not every day is that problem that they couldn't figure out that you're solving.
Yeah,
but I have realized that this is something that I don't know how much longer I could be a contract climber at this same level.
Okay.
So where's the next step? And like, I've taken a lot of different approaches to that. Like, people have always asked me why I don't start my own business, sort of thing, so that you could do that.
Yep.
But I would want to do it on a very niche, smaller field. I would love to continue contracting and then maybe change the focus from big trees to more like structure pruning, ornamental trees, or developmental pruning and development trees, because we have so many development, So those are thoughts that run through my head of like, well, how can I continue doing what I love doing so much, but change it so that's not so physically taxing, so I'll be able to do it longer. Or I love the training side of it. So, part of my thought process, and like 2 years ago, I was doing a ton of seminars and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is naturally progressing this way. This is my end game, let's say, is moving more towards training. But then I realized this year I haven't really gotten any calls for that. So that's also going to be an ebb and flow thing. And I either have to really focus and put a lot of energy to try to gain those, which I could. But I don't like forcing things like that too much.
Agreed.
I think they're better when they happen
Organically.
naturally.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's something I'm constantly thinking about. What's the next step? But I don't know if I have a specific answer.
Sure.
I remember Mark saying something right after the expo. It seemed like that question must have came up to him a lot, because he put something out there that's like, if you don't know what your next step is or what the next thing is, contact me. He's like, I have a lot of ideas on where you can go with what positions you're in. Him and Jared are guys I really go to at expos or things when I run into them, because they've been leaders in the industry, and they've went from, working at a family business or, and then doing the instructor thing. Yeah. And they've constantly progressed, and I look up to them in what they've done. And I don't know if I follow right in suit with them, or and they didn't follow each other either.
Sure.
Like everybody gets their own path, but those talking to guys that are ahead of me and just starting to get ideas, like I see a lot of people getting these knuckle booms, and that means you can still do tree work, but from the ground, not being nearly as physically demanding, but using your brain, which we've gained a ton of knowledge in trees. And that's fun of it too.
Yeah.
Like I like the mental stimulation of a Rubik's Cube. I love the mental stimulation of pruning, removals, all of the work that comes into tree work. Like I get a kick out of the setup. Like where do you park the truck? Where do you set the bucket up at? The lift, like crane jobs. Dude, those things are so much fun in that. So like I've kept really good relations with the companies I've worked at, and one of the end goal things was like maybe I go back to those companies in a leadership role of just a trainer, or one of these larger, like Save a Tree had come to me when I first started contracting and said, "Would you want to be a regional trainer?" But I had just started contracting, so I was really focused and said not the time and place, but there's going to be that time. So do I take a role like that?
Right.
And then it's like trying to know yourself, like. I do have a higher energy level. I'm not a desk person. So could I go to a company and be a trainer where I'm going to have to be filling out a lot of reports or doing a lot of paperwork? I don't know if I can see that in me. But could I be a foreman on a crew, really organizing thing, helping new guys become climbers? Or like, I could see that. Like, then how do I try to find my skills and within physical limitations of getting older and apply that? And those are the things that I consider when I think about an end game. They also like the training side, the supply side. I love the gear. I've always loved the gear. I like, maybe I could build what I do with Notch to make it maybe not a full-time job, but a lot more supplemental income that I can step away from contracting so much. Like these are the things I think about, and how can I apply the skills that I have when I'm going to be losing some of the physical abilities that I have, like because I still have them to do the job at a higher level.
I just think it's important for listeners to hear that. They're just things to consider. And again, to me, it's just part of the algorithm, right? I'm tapping into your word. I think it's important to just have, like, people ask me the same thing. Are you selling the business? Is your son taking over? And I'm like, well, I kind of have a flow chart. I have like a plan A, B, C, C1, D. Like there are multiple ways, but they all require me to show up today at my best.
Right.
And try to get 100 on the test.
Yeah,
that's right. So that's it's like in the here and now. I'm going to bring the best of what I can give today. I'm going to take care of my mind, body, spirit the best way I can today. I'm going to live in the now with an eye to the future if I'm blessed enough to have another day. But be willing to, and is it I step away and the sun takes over and I do 3 days a week and a couple days a week I chase these other things. Like I think it's good what you're saying to lay out several plans, and I also love what you said about letting things happen. It's not like we're It's not like we're passive in our goals and roles and things. Like we do apply and bring ourselves to it, but I'm not the type of guy that wants to invite myself to dinner at your house. No. You know what I mean? It's got to be. There's got to be an organic nature to it.
I agree. I really agree with that.
I was gonna say I love when you said it, and you just back it up, but the idea that the idea that you want something but don't work towards it is stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. But the idea you think you're going to work towards something to make something happen the way you want it to happen is stupid. The idea you work your ass off towards something because you want it and then let it happen naturally and see what happens and then adjust the sales according to that situation. That's the genius move.
Right.
So you just nailed, let's just say, 7 different things.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
And you also said, like, I don't want to force it. I'm putting you're putting your best effort in every day.
Keep the options open.
Yeah, and then something naturally, it's all going to, and it sounds cheesy, but it's all going to work out the way it needs to, but you have to show up to be your best. You can't sit back and accept it or expect it, but you also can't push too hard to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'm a
There's a
firm
balance in everything.
It's so crazy.
Absolutely.
It makes me, and this is a biblical principle, and a lot of times I do come back to these types of things. It's like Jesus when they talk about like knocking at the door. It's like it's okay to knock on a door. It's okay to knock. You're not inviting yourself in. You know, if the opportunity's right, the door opens, right? Kind of thing. I mean, it's a loose, very loose interpretation, but, and it's something Cynthia Mills always says to me. She's like, just keep showing up and doing the work.
Yeah.
Keep showing up and doing the work. And opportunities kind of, you know, present themselves. It's like us with this podcast. Like we are really detached from the outcome. We get to sit down with our friends, people, and in some cases, and it will come where it's people we don't know, or that you've got somebody on the docket down the road that I don't personally know, which is cool because I'll get to know them and we'll dive deep. But we just want to show up, have good conversation, immerse ourselves fully in it, and just kind of like where it goes, it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit there and, I mean, I'm going to look at metrics, but I'm not going to be all wrapped up in like who's seeing it. And like, I'm just not, I'm not in that space. I have to go out and work. I got fire with the process. This for me is almost like one of the activities like that you do outside of tree work. It's attached to it, but this makes me, I feel, more excited and better when I go out the next day to work.
Oh yeah.
Because there's an excitement and the idea of getting to sit down with you guys and have this conversation, I'm uplifted now.
For sure.
So I'm
like,
benefiting
yeah.
from it, you know, and it's like, oh,
I
I'm
can
gonna
feel it.
process wood tomorrow, you know, like
It can be anything.
You know, like,
yeah.
No, definitely.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
is essentially what we said to kick it off. Well, this is the expo. This is the conference. This is
these are the conversations you go to the expo for.
For, exactly.
You know, as much as I learn in taking the classes, at this point, I learn the most from the conversations I have outside of the classes.
Absolutely.
When I network in the evenings at dinner, try to talk to somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, try to listen in on a conversation.
Yeah, trying to jump in.
dude, if that's not a closing statement, I don't know.
I think that's a great
that so succinctly loses the plan because we started there and we end there with the idea that what you just said is exactly what this is about. 100%. I mean, just bringing those conversations here and just kind of letting them go. And, you know, kudos to Desmond for like, hey, stop watching the watch. Stop looking at the clock. Stop worrying about how long you've been going. Have a conversation and let it sort of naturally button itself up.
Naturally work itself.
Yeah, you know, which is cool because the last two we sort of did that and boom, and there it is. So, you know, from my perspective, and I'm going to let you, you know, close us out or whatever, but thank you for being here. And just a quick summary. Hopefully, and I mean, it's pretty evident the passion that Derrick brings. But man, and this is a part I didn't know about him until I got to know him better, is the detail, the love, the passion for getting in those little nooks and crannies. And I've seen him inspect just a beaner and kind of like, it's 3 planes and it's this and that. And it's like, it's the love of that little tiny detail that's, to me, it's infectious. So when you come into work, I'm not really hung up on what you're getting done. It's important because we got to pay you and pay the guys, and that's the lifeblood of an operation, right? But having you come and just elevate that passion, that's one of those invigorators for me. That's part of what you're fulfilling as a friend in my life is bringing that excitement. And now I'm going to bounce off of that for a few weeks. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
It was something I took as when I started contracting. I thought I was there to just get the job done as fast as possible and deal with it. And then I started to realize that sometimes I'm there to reduce the stress on a job or just to change the atmosphere. Yeah. Like sometimes a company will call me to come in from out of the area and work with them a week, and it's not necessarily produce more. Yeah. No, it's to change, like, hey, we need someone to come in to lift up the energy, to give a new perspective, or just, you know, to take a look at us and evaluate us. And like, and that's been interesting. And I eventually learned that as a contract climber, my job's just to make the job easier. And sometimes that's in just making the schedule, like knowing I'm going to show up on time and not having to stress that, hey, we have Derrick today. Derrick's coming in.
Dude, honestly, for me as an owner operator, because I'm the I'm the driving force at everything. Like, it's all on me. When I bring someone in of your caliber, and especially having like more inexperienced guys, and now my kid's out there, I basically told you or asked you to take my kid up in a tree. I would ask him.
Yeah.
There's a group of guys in my tribe that I would allow that to happen, and I want those conversations to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't have to think of any weird conversations or anything. Like, you guys are, man, it's just, that's a big deal to know, like, I can breathe. I can do my estimates, and I don't have to worry about some weird crap going on. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and I'm gonna let you. Closing thoughts, comments, whatever.
So obviously, thank you for being here for the podcast. Number one, but it's what I already told you before. What I love about is the energy that you have. Obviously, that's just infectious, as he was saying before. But more importantly, for the listeners, and I think you can back this up in your closing point, but. Just keep in mind, like Derrick has put the time in. He's at an elite level. He's super passionate, down to earth. He's always willing to help you out. If anything, anytime you come in contact in his orbit, you always walk away with like, damn, he's a cool dude. He's really trying to help me out and that kind of stuff. So that, like, thank you for that, for me as well. You know what I mean? What I wanted to drive home at the same time is for the listeners listening, do not be intimidated by that a person has put a lot of time in and feel like, oh, he's at this, elite level. We said the same thing about Mark Chisholm. Like, don't do that. Like, this guy right here sitting across from us. People. we're people, exactly. And this guy, just like Mark Chisholm, and most people that are at the elite level are willing to uplift you into being like, hey, we're at the same level. You think I'm up higher. I just put the time in. Right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say to the listeners, keep that in your mind as you listen to this podcast. Again, because there's some good nuggets in here. But with all that being said, I do appreciate our friendship. And, every time I see you, I'm like, dude, I stop doing what I'm doing. I beeline every time.
I love these relationships because these are the ones that probably mean the most to me, because it's the people, like we said, we kind of live in this bubble, and these are the people in that bubble with us that just are so passionate as well, and bring that passion when we all get together. And I know, like, just being around you guys, it's going to be good conversations, good time. I'm going to come away uplifted. But awesome. I appreciate what you just said too. Because, like, you can get burned out in so many different things. One of the things I got really burned out in recently is the social media stuff and everything like that. Yeah. But I also realize how much that can benefit others. Yes. And so when you say that you still approachable and stuff, I want people to approach me because that's how I get remotivated for that stuff. Like, someone this week DM'd me and said, hey, actually it was yesterday, and they said, hey, you post these pictures of end weight reduction, but that's hard for a lot of people to get out and do. You should do a video on, and that suggestion's awesome because, like, I'm burned out on social media. I can't think about it, period. Yeah. But to have someone give me a suggestion like that is like, oh, that's what you need to see. Yeah. Like, those are amazing. Yeah. Those are great. Mm. But until people approach you with them, I don't think about them anymore. Yeah. There was a time where I was trying to really be creative and come up with these ideas, but then I just stopped. Yeah. Like,
it's a double-edged axe, man. Yeah. I've been feeling like when I get on there sometimes, immediately I start to doom scroll and I feel the anxiety level come up, and I just it's been a delicate dance for me, man.
Yeah, really I kind of specifically have taken a break from posting a lot, but now I do feel like I need to get back into it again. And I think it can be remotivating for yourself as well. But again, to the point, like, approach people because they're just human. They're just another person. Mark Chisholm was extremely intimidating. And then I realized Jared Abergina, extremely intimidating, but they're just people. You can talk to them. They've been through most of the same experiences that you have too. We're not that unique. We've just put a lot of work and passion into what we do.
Exactly.
By the way, I mean, Jared and his group out there immediately were behind us with this venture.
Oh, he's
Immediate.
incredibly
Yeah.
supportive.
And I can't tell you what that meant to me. I mean, and I've said it before, like we're not besties or anything, but there's always a good exchange when I see him, and just like you said, you feel uplifted, and just to have someone of that level kind of just give you a nod. It's like, I so appreciate it, man. I really do. So
Yes, sir.
Something that seems so cool about this community is the supportiveness of it.
Yeah.
When we don't know each other all that well, it's that's really cool. I think it's pretty uplifting within the community to maybe not know someone but come across them and just be able to see their passion, whether they're just getting into it or been into it for a long time, and then connect on them within that realm.
cool.
Yeah, I think it's definitely unique.
It
for
is.
sure. I do.
So, all right. So with that,
man,
just
thank you.
do you have any way people can, like, if they want to reach out? What's the best way you appreciate for them?
Instagram's actually one of the best ways to reach out to me.
what is
I
your-
see it pretty quick. Country Boy PA 31 has become my handle, which
That's
is
cool.
hilarious because that's an email address from when I was a kid that
right.
stuck with me.
Awesome. I love it.
It's fun to be known as Country Boy as much as known as Derrick.
That's great.
I think that's kind of cool.
That is.
It's fun.
It's
So
a persona.
Instagram's a good way. Facebook, you can get a hold of me. I don't do well with email, so don't.
No, don't. Yeah. No.
If you got my number, you can call me. But I really appreciate when people reach out because I do really enjoy this, and I enjoy answering questions. And I try to, when we do the crane school and stuff, I try to give people, I tell people to reach out because, we do these seminars, we do these teachings and stuff, and you don't retain everything. And then you get out in the field and you kind of forget it. And it's like, man, those are the times to reach out.
Yeah.
Like if you took something away from a talk, whether it's this talk on your podcast or whether it was a seminar or just something you saw online, but it didn't quite stick, to reach out about that is the best way to engage because, dude, I love it. Like we do. We love it.
Yeah.
And
No, we do.
to have something specific to answer is sometimes a great feeling.
I
To
agree.
feel like, okay, this is how I can make a difference for that one person.
100%.
Got it, man. Yeah.
It's the same thing for everything. When we talk about seminars, like I want people to get the most out of them as possible. So typically, yes, I have a topic and we're going to stick to that topic, but what we talk about within that is going to change pretty dramatically on the feedback from people
100%.
there right away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
By the way, as I button this up, if there's any guests that have been on here that you all don't remember how to get a hold of or need, you can DM Brick
Yes,
or myself, or just message the Aging Arborist podcast, and we'll make sure we can make those connections for you, get some questions answered and things like that. So, all right, boys,
Well said.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
All right, we're
Thank
out. Yep, out.